It's since our May regular meeting, Justify, the horse that won the Kentucky Derby, has won the Triple Crown. And also, it's been exactly 1 year to the date that the administration group moved into this building and we started serving customers here. In 2 more days will be the 21st of June, which is the summer solstice, which is the beginning of summer. And it's also the longest day of the year in terms of sunlight in the Northern Hemisphere. This is a significant point in the seasonal calendar as the world moves towards renewable energy sources. So putting production of electricity on the same level as farming in some ways. So we'll go ahead with our first item. Oh, I'm sorry. I should introduce myself. I'm Anna Marie Pavlik-Rosen, the chair of the board. To my right is Walt Baldwin, our vice chair. Dawn Hale, our secretary-treasurer. Ralph Ledwig, member, and Steve Mason, member. Our attorney, James Liebman. So welcome, everyone. Our first item is consider approving minutes of the May 15th board meeting, the June 5th special board meeting, and budget meeting, and the June 5th evening meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read those? Do we want to approve them individually or as a group?
There's no discussion, then I'll move that we approve the prepared minutes of the May 15, 2018 board meeting and of the special meeting, June 5, 2018. And of the June 5, 2018 special budget meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we've approved the minutes. Our next item is action item, consider approval of workman's compensation insurance renewal.
Kim Watson, or Kim Phillips, is not with us tonight, so take her place. Time to renew the workers' comp, just a typical annual event. The premium this year is $111,543, decrease of 10%. That's due in large part to the efforts of Kim and all the departments here that work safely every day. It's the lowest that it's been in the past 20 years. So to recommend renewal of the policies, and have Charlie Hamilton and Stanley with us tonight to answer any questions that might come up.
Board members, do you have any questions concerning workman's comp?
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to compliment Kim and the staff for doing such a great job and keeping accidents and things down, so it keeps the rate down.
Good point. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the renewal of our workers' compensation policy with KyMEA at the renewal premium of $111,543.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passed. Okay. Our next item of business is a presentation. The board is guided by James Liebman, the attorney for the board, which is important since the board functions on a similar level to the Public Service Commission, looking out for the ratepayers. And we're also guided by Hans Price, the attorney for FPB staff and daily operations. I invited Gordon Slone, who is part of the Attorney General's office, to make a presentation to the board on open meetings requirements and also recent changes passed by the legislature in this session. Gordon's full title is Manager, Administration, Hearings Board, Civil and Environmental Law, Office of the Attorney General. So welcome, Gordon. Thank you for coming and updating us.
Well, thank you. First thing I'm going to do is hand out some paper It's just part of the presentation, but it also has the exemptions, if you'll just pass those around, that are in the open meetings law. The reason I'm passing this out is so that if you're tired of looking at me, you can look at the presentation on a piece of paper. But importantly, the exceptions are at the back, and that seems to be where we have most of our problems with agencies that have meetings. And anytime you have a meeting, you want to go into a closed session, or you have to do it strictly according to our exceptions. I'm going to get into that, but the first thing, again, I'm with the Office of the Attorney General. Okay, and they told me this would work. There it does. Okay, if you remember nothing else about this entire, and Anna Marie has given me about 30 minutes, so somebody give me the high sign when you get really, really bored. If you remember nothing else, we have a pamphlet on our website, and it's kind of more for laypersons than for real technical, but it's very helpful. It's kind of a distillation of our wisdom that we try to put out to agencies every time there's a change to the law. We haven't made our changes yet, but we will be, because there have been some changes to the Open Meetings and the Open Records Act this last general session. So now we play both sides of the street. This is for you guys. It's called your duty under the law. But when I say we play both sides of the street, we put that other pamphlet out there for the public. If they've got a problem with an agency, they want to request a record, they want to complain to the agency that they violated the Open Meetings Act, that gives them some procedures that they can understand without having to go through the act and try to figure out what it means. So it's pretty helpful to the general layperson, but it's pretty helpful to me too. A meeting. What is a meeting? Okay, now this is, if anybody can't stay with me and your forehead meets the desk, I understand you've had long days. So I have tried to keep these as simple as possible to keep your interest, but some people think that a meeting is where you take action. I'll emphasize, yeah, you've got to take minutes of actions in a meeting, but a meeting is more than just taking action. It's when you have a quorum, you're discussing public business, any public business. So just remember that. If a group, and we'll go into this a little bit later, but if a group gets together and they're a quorum and they discuss church business, that's not a public meeting to which the Open Meetings Act applies. But if you get together and you do start edging away from UK basketball and into, gosh, the latest thing that might come up at the next board meeting, then you are subject to the Open Meetings Act. Time and place of meetings. You guys have done great. This is a great place to have a meeting. I've had some cases where some agencies are not quite as civic-minded as you are. They put their meetings at night, perhaps at the end of a long, dark, unpaved road, unlighted, or they've even gone, maybe they've locked the doors to the building. So those are some of the things that you have to do. You have to make it fairly convenient to the public to attend your meetings. You have to have a schedule of regular meetings. Typically what happens, that I don't know what your agency does, but an agency will, at the beginning of a year, either a calendar year or a fiscal year, put their schedule out for the rest of the year. Usually, I don't know what your schedule is, but it may be the first Monday at 5 p.m. of each month, or it might be quarterly, whatever. You put that out there. You have to publish it so that the public has access to it. I would want another thing, conduct every meeting as if the public is present. Sometimes there are, a lot of times I give presentations to water boards, the commissioners of water boards, and there may not be anybody there but then, because not all that great, not all that exciting. But you should run every meeting as if the public is present. Now, one thing you can't require is, or coerce, is sign-in sheets. So just as the public can't really participate in your meeting if you don't want them to, by the same token, you can't put any requirements on their attendance. Minutes of the meetings. You have to have minutes for every meeting. you only have to record the actions. Now, sometimes I get questions about how in-depth you have to go. Some people write down everything that's said, everything that's done. And typically, that's not what is required. We require the actions. Was the meeting called to order? What was done? Like here, you approved the minutes of the last meeting because they have to be ready at the end of this meeting in case somebody wants them. Now that's up there too. So any questions on that so far? Anytime that you have a question, I'll try to answer it. Notice I emphasize try, but don't hesitate to ask, okay? Special meeting. I noticed you got a notice on the front of the building about a special meeting. You don't know what a special meeting is. You can look at the slide and say, aha, I'm going to cheat and tell you. It's any time you have a meeting at a place or a time other than what's on the regular schedule. So you have a notice for a special meeting today. Was it today?
This is a regular meeting.
Okay, I thought it said special meeting. Okay, I saw one out there for a special meeting.
It's a meeting within the meeting.
Okay. So that's good that you have it posted on the front of the building. And anytime you have a special meeting, you have to make sure that the members of the agency know about it ahead of time, typically at least 24 hours. You've also got to give notice to the media if they've asked to be given notice of that. Now, who can call a special meeting is typically the presiding officer or a majority of the members. You would probably be surprised at how often there are agencies that perhaps are not, getting along together, and they may try to have a meeting without their presiding officer, or the presiding officer may try to have a meeting without some of the members. It happens. There's also something called an emergency meeting. That's a little bit more in depth than I wanted to go through in 30 minutes. But that's typically when you don't have time to put the meeting notice out and so on, but you've got to try to notify everybody as much as possible. The presiding officer, again, typically is the one who calls that emergency meeting. It's just if you have a real emergency, and then the meeting is limited to that reason that you called it for. So we have just our typical regular meetings, we have special meetings, and then we have emergency as well. Any questions on that so far? Good. The notice of a special meeting, again, you probably do read in the newspaper quite often where some agency has been accused of a violation or has been found to have violated the open meetings law. And there are just a number of things that agencies have to comply with. Just in the notice of a special meeting, you have to include the date, time, and place. You have to have, for special meetings, you have to have an agenda. For your regular meetings, you don't have to have an agenda. Now, don't get confused with minutes. You have to have minutes every time. But agenda, you only have to have for special meetings. But it helps every time in just your regular meeting as well. And then for that special meeting, I mentioned the discussion is limited to just the agenda items. I mentioned that delivery and posting of those notices, it can be by personal delivery, fax, or mail to media within 24 hours notice before the meeting. Let me just back up a minute. You see right here at the bottom of the page, I have put the page number that corresponds to the pamphlet. I didn't give you the pamphlet. I'm sorry, I didn't have that much paper on me. But it corresponds with where you'd find it in that pamphlet. What is a closed session? Okay, here's where we really get messed up sometimes. A closed session is basically where you exclude the public. Now and typically you only have the members. Now there are some exceptions. For instance, you may have your general counsel available. Sometimes you may need somebody to assist you in the business of the agency. But those are very strictly construed exceptions. And I gave you a copy of the exceptions at the back of the handout. And there are really only a couple that typically come up. C, discussions of proposed or pending litigation against or on behalf of the public agency. And before you go into a special meeting, you have to explain why you're going into it, which exemption specifically you're going into, it's strictly construed. So that's one of the main ones that people go, or agencies go into to discuss proposed or pending. Proposed is typically when you know that somebody's going to be suing you, so you may want to go into a meeting to discuss how that's going to affect you. Or if you know that the agency is going to be bringing suit or litigation against somebody else, or if you already have litigation ongoing. So discussions of proposed or pending litigation against or on behalf of the public agency is one of them. Now here on F, that one's a little bit longer. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Discussions or hearings which might lead to the appointment, discipline, or dismissal of an individual. And I focus on that word individual. It doesn't mean groups. It doesn't mean numbers. It means individual. Employee, member, or student, so on and so forth. The exception shall not be interpreted to permit discussion of general personnel matters in secret. So again, it has to be for those reasons that are lined there: appointment, discipline, dismissal of an individual, employee, member, etc., etc. And you can't just go in to discuss general personnel. And that's where a lot of agencies get into violations. They want to go into special meeting. Maybe there's hardly anybody there. They really want to talk about them amongst themselves. Maybe you don't feel right. You're going to talk about a layoff, perhaps. Can you go into closed session to talk about a layoff? Well, the layoff does not apply to an individual. So that's where it gets difficult. It's even difficult if you're going to talk about dismissing a single person, because you have to give adequate notice of what you're going to be discussing in the closed session. So I do feel for you in all the difficulties that you face going into closed session, because these are typically, it's the tough issues where you have to go into closed session. So I do recognize that. One other thing that sometimes we see, discussions between a public agency and this is G, discussions between a public agency and a representative of a business entity, and discussions concerning a specific proposal, not general proposals. If open discussions would jeopardize, and again, there's another qualification. If discussions would jeopardize the siding, retention, expansion, or upgrading of the business. So you have to be, I don't know if you deal with that, but sometimes that's for the business.
Would that have to pertain specifically to a business, a new business that you're working with? Or could it be, say, a consultant that we have, which is a business, or?
Well, it's talking about the siding, S-I-T-I-N-G, retention, expansion, or upgrading of the business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that those qualifications you talked about really mean anything.
Right.
But it's got to be strictly construed.
Okay, so it's very specific.
Yes, very. Very.
Back up to C, what about potential litigation?
Yeah, proposed or pending. If you are proposing, or you know that somebody is proposing litigation against you, it certainly behooves the agency to talk about that. It has to be more than just a vague possibility. It's got to be something that's pretty imminent. There has to be something that's going on that leads you to that, more than just rumors.
So on G a little bit, I guess two things come to mind. Would those exceptions cover us for discussing expansions of our business that could potentially have a negative competitive impact from another agency pursuing similar business line?
I think you have to look at this from, you are the agency, you're not the business.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was the other way around. Okay.
Bingo, it's so easy.
Okay. So then we don't have any, so we have no protections from outside competitive forces is basically what that means.
That's the way I read it.
Okay. And then I guess one other along that lines that's been a problem for us is when you're dealing with an external agency that has non-disclosure agreements on
Agency or business?
Agency.
Okay.
And they have non-disclosure agreements because of, with businesses people beyond them.
Uh-huh.
How do we discuss any of that?
In the open session, I mean.
But we can't because we're precluded by the,
If not-
aren't we precluded by the NDA from doing that? We're party-
The NDA would not take precedence over the Open Meetings Act.
Oh, really? So even though they have an NDA and we're a party to it, we're not bound by it because of the open
I wouldn't
meetings
say
Act?
you're not bound by it, I'm just saying the Open Records Act would say you've got, doesn't matter. Now, open records is a different story. There, you can have non-disclosure agreements that can apply if you are giving information to an agency. So if you were given, pardon me, so for instance, if a hospital is looking to buy a public piece of property, say you own some property, they want you to enter into an NDA, then that can be an exception to the Open Records Act.
Right.
But the Open Meetings Act is just a little enough different that it can cause you to trip.
So then it just precludes the agency from ever being able to discuss the content covered by the NDA?
Not know, you can discuss it all you want in open session.
But then that would open us to, that would expose us via the obligations of the NDA.
There's a, maybe, I can't go too far down.
I
the road with
understand,
you,
yeah.
But yeah, there may be a conflict and there may not be a way out of it other than abiding by the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
I can't give you a free pass.
I understand that.
So if we did want to, you know, it's our ratepayers are at risk here because we're not able to discuss things as a board. And so could we apply to get an opinion for the Attorney General's office to be able to do it?
Typically, we don't issue opinions that I'm aware of
Oh.
on open meetings or open records.
Okay.
Like you do for other matters.
Okay.
I guess that does raise an interesting point, though. You know, who decides what's reasonable to consider as confidential? You know, in this particular situation, we're dealing with another public agency,
Mhm.
and they're concealing the information via NDA. How do you get a judgment on what is reasonable to conceal by the NDA?
Well, the only way that I'm going to say is through making an open meetings complaint. I'll go over that process in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it is a very difficult law to comply with. But you got to remember, the basic premise of the Open Meetings Act is that public policy should be open to the public. That's the basic premise from which all this stems. Now, the Open Meetings Act has some small changes recently, but it really hasn't changed wholesale in a long time. But some of those principles are never changing. The things that you mentioned, you know, the conflict between an agency that perhaps need to have some privacy versus something that has to do with emails. Now, emails are fairly recent, but those conflicts between business confidentiality or public agency confidentiality, those have always been pretty much around. So it's difficult, but again, the reason for this law is that the formulation of public policy should be open to the public.
But in this particular situation, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to change the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the subject doesn't fall under one of these exceptions, it can't be discussed in closed session. And that, you know, the idea is, gosh, we've got to be able to do this. We're bound by an NDA or whatever the issue is. We can't let everybody know we're about to have a layoff because it would have adverse consequences. It just, yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, but the difficulty here is that, you know, we just simply can't discuss it because we can't discuss an open session, we can't discuss it in closed session, so it's just, we're effectively without any oversight capability because of the conflict between the NDA and the NDA requiring us to be in closed session and the open meetings not allowing us to be in closed session and not being able to talk about it in open session because of the NDA.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It is a conflict.
But
Did you have something?
no.
Okay.
Again, I think I've covered some of this. When you go into closed session, you have to end open session. Explain the general nature of the business that you're going to talk about in the closed session, the reason for it, and the specific provision that covers it. You have to have a motion, and, you know, even the simple little things you think, I mean, I've seen that you have done it right here. You've had a motion, you've had a second, you've asked for any discussion, then you have a vote. Sometimes even these small little things can trip you up, especially when you're talking about weighty public issues. So just be aware that, you know, if you think you're about to make a mistake, stop, think about it, go back and do it right. Now, one thing it's probably obvious to most people, but it's happened. You can't take final action on an issue in the closed session. Now, we've got opinions out there that say you can take a straw vote, which means it's non-binding. So that when you come out closed session, you can put the motion out and you probably know if it's going to pass or not. But you can't take that final action in the closed session. Here's one, believe it or not, I've had at least one case where this happened. You had, again, that situation where the members of the agency didn't want the presiding officer to know what they were doing, so they would send the emails to each other and and it made up a quorum of the agency, and that was without public participation. The public couldn't observe all those emails. So yeah, that was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So if you have a series of meetings, you know, if you two got together, you two, with the intent of subverting the Open Meetings Act, that would be a violation. And sometimes you say, well, we didn't say we were going to do that. Well, no, but if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, on and on. And sometimes you may say we really are innocent, but you have to be extremely careful of appearances as well. But again, not every gathering of a quorum. You know, if everybody here goes to see the UK Wildcats play, that's great, because you're talking about the UK Wildcats. Yes, ma'am.
Under the email string, I guess.
Huh?
But I could send out an email to the rest of the board for informational purposes, correct? I mean, that's what it says.
There is that exception.
Right, so as long as we aren't discussing it, but it's purely, you know, I'm not trying to get votes, I'm not trying to lobby my position, I'm simply sending out an email for informational purposes, then that is not violating the law.
That's what the exception says, but we look at everything and the circumstances surrounding it. You may be totally innocent in what you do. The guy sitting next to you looks a little sketchy.
So if someone replied to an informational email,
That's a good point. Is that then discussing it?
yes, I mean, that's a question.
Yeah, I probably would be very cautious about discussing an email.
But one board member could reply to another specific board member, maybe the person who sent out the email, and just as two individuals talking or communicating.
Yeah, okay, now, you caught me, because that up there, if I go back, it's somewhere in there about a quorum. So if it's just two of you, you know, you're not a quorum.
Well, there was this group email first, and then one person wrote back to the writer, let's say, and they went back and forth a little bit. That would be legal, if it's just...
I hesitate to say one way or the other, because again, as I said, we look at everything and all the circumstances surrounding it. But if it's just for informational purposes, I don't know if there's a need to discuss it.
Okay, good point.
I'd be very cautious on that.
Okay.
Let me see if I went too far.
What's the next one?
Okay, here is where I'm going to talk about video conference, and this is one of the changes to the Open Meetings Act, and it's actually already in effect. It was bundled with another law that was an emergency law, and it went into effect on April 14th. And one of the big changes there is before the change, you could have any meeting except the closed session through video teleconference. And then they just line through that part about except video teleconference. So now you can have any meeting including video teleconference via, including closed session via video teleconference. You still have to have the notice, the same thing, but the notice now, whereas before it had to notice all of the locations, what we would call satellite locations, if you guys were over in Paducah because you've been doing some good work over there, but you had a video conference going on, we would have had to have a notice for that as well. But now the notice only has to say it's going to be here in Frankfort. And this law is so new, we haven't had a chance to make any decisions on it. Who's gotten in trouble yet, or who is doing something that maybe just on the edges already. But one part of the law says the same procedures with regard to participation, distribution, and other matters, that remains the same. So here's the, like if you two guys are out in Paducah, but you're needed for a quorum, you can attend via video teleconference. But what about the materials? You'll have to have the same materials as if you were here. You have to be able to see and hear everybody that's talking here. They'll have to be able to see and hear you.
So something like Skype would work?
Again, this is where I hide behind my lawyer clothes and say, gosh, we haven't had a case on that yet, so I'm not going to give you a definitive answer. But what is a video teleconference? Yeah, it's pretty much Skype. But again, you have to be able to see and hear everybody else, and they have to be able to see and hear you. Now, what does it mean when it says same procedures with regard to other matters? I don't know. I'm thinking of the guy he's necessary for the quorum, and he's traveling, he's in Peoria, and, can he join in as long as you can see and hear, and he's got all the documents that you need? We haven't had it, but that's what it looks like. But again, I do caution you about other matters.
So is there a difference if the video conference is from an external resource in the sense that all of the agency members are in the same physical location and you simply have a subject matter expert or something giving a teleconference to describe things does that change that dynamic?
You don't have to think about that one. I don't think that would, since he or she would not be a member of the agency, that's not so much of a problem. That the same requirement would be on them as it is on the agency.
So then there would be no preclusion of doing video conferencing for
See, he
meetings
must
as long as we have
he starts out wide and then he goes narrow, 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 narrow.
details.
Yeah. So I have to be cautious about how narrow I can go. But I did want to make you aware of this change. Also, at the very bottom, any interruption in the video or audio broadcast suspend the meeting until it's restored. This is, okay, here's where some foreheads are going to hit the desk. Okay, how to enforce the Open Meetings Act. Generally, if somebody here says, or even one of you, remember, I've had those agencies out there that kind of get torqued at their fellow agency members. And I even had the head of the agency make complaints. So how do they do that? They first have to make a complaint, and the statute says to the presiding officer of the agency. You've got to give the agency notice that you're actually thinking that they violated the Open Meetings Act. Then the agency has 3 days to respond in writing. Everything's got to be in writing. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear already. You've got to send a written notice to the agency. You've got to respond within 3 days. And then you've got, I think, 60 days, or the complainant has 60 days to send it to us, that being the Office of the Attorney General. Or, if you want to, you can take it to the circuit court immediately. Just like with the Open Records Act, you don't have to go to the Attorney General office, but there's no cost to going through the Attorney General's office if you've got a complaint. So those are the two sides of it, as far as that goes. In your complaint to the agency, you've got to tell them what you want them to do to remedy the action. You can't be out of bounds, but if you think that there has been a violation in the way they made a motion and approved the motion, then you could say, well, whatever that action was, it should be invalidated. Okay. Now, when it comes to me at the Office of the Attorney General, all I can say is whether or not there was a violation. I can't say that the action you want to have taken is good or bad. All I get to say is yes, there was a violation or not. Now, one thing about the Attorney General opinions, or pardon me, open meetings decisions and open records decisions, is they're sort of like getting a decision from a court. If nobody appeals them, then they have the force of law. You actually then go to court if the other person or the agency doesn't comply and enforce it through court. If the agency doesn't want that to happen, they actually have to sue the complainant. I had one case where the guy said, yeah, now I won and they're suing me. I didn't really know about this, so just be aware of that. If you win, you may get sued. Okay. I've talked a little bit about this already. You have to appeal our decision within 30 days, otherwise it has the force of law. There are forms in that your duty under the law that, again, it's more for a layperson. Example, open records response and open meetings, etc. I have some internet addresses in there for the statutes, the question and answers that we have, etc., etc. Local and state records retentions are important, and so on. Now, we've revamped our website for the Attorney General. So to get to the open records and open meetings, you have to go under the honest government part. And once you click on that, you'll see that there's open records, open meetings decision. And man, there's just a lot of stuff under there. It's so good. We've got those two pamphlets I talked about, one for the agency, one for the public. We've got, if you scroll down, you'll see that you can go to any of our decisions that are online. I think it's back like 1996 or something like that. And if you can't find it online, you just fax us and we'll get a copy of it to you because we've got them all on microfilm. Okay, now that really covers the open meetings. I don't know if you want to go into open records because of time constraints.
Well, maybe, perhaps if we have any specific questions. Does anyone have questions?
I have one more around pending litigation. How broad is that? Does a suit have to be imminent? Do you have to know for certain that you're going to sue somebody? How?
Yeah, it would depend on circumstances. If somebody has said, I'm going to sue the Frankfort Plant Board, and they have a reason, perhaps, that they are going to sue you, I would take that as pretty imminent. It all depends on the circumstances.
Is it limited to an actual court of law, or would another government agency or rulemaking process be also covered by the pending litigation?
I'm not sure I follow.
So if there was going to be a rate making case in front of the PSC,
okay,
would that be something that's considered pending litigation? Or in our particular case, in front of FERC?
It's not real litigation, is it?
Just an administrative process?
Yeah, gosh, let me back off of that one because I would have to look at again all the circumstances surrounding it. But I'm going to say it's likely.
It is covered.
I'm going to say likely, but I'm not going to say 100%. This is being recorded, right?
General direction's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Open records, let me see if there's anything that I can think of that really gets people in trouble. Responding. Okay, a lot of times agencies just don't respond. You've got to respond in writing, typically within 3 days. In county, and that's typically who you deal with, in county you can require an in-county requester to come to the agency to look at the records rather than going ahead and making records to send out. Now the flip side of that is, oh my gosh, all those records, they probably have a lot of personal information that you don't want to just let somebody run through. So most often what you see is even in-county requester will say, I want a copy of this record, so on and so forth. That's one of the things that agencies can do. If you have somebody who's just making a nuisance of themselves, sometimes that can be a problem, and you can have them come to the agency. They don't really want to. I had one case where the guy says, I want to go to the city and get these records, but they're needing me. Well, he was one of the commissioners. So, city commissioners. So sometimes it does get funny. Trying to think if there's any other things that, open record, can you think of anything else that you have questions on?
I can. We're about to do a GM search, a search for our new general manager. And how much of those records, how do we handle open records requests concerning that? Or what are normal pitfalls, like the University of Louisville ran into some problems recently? Or is there any major area that they overlooked?
Some of the ones that we see is where an agency may form a committee and not realize that that committee itself is subject to the open records, open meetings law.
Mm-hmm.
So you may say, okay, you two, you're now the committee. Well, what's a quorum here? I don't know. But definitely the Open Meetings Act would still apply to them, and any records that they have would still apply. So that's where we see a lot of problems as well. I'm not sure exactly the issue of that you're talking about. I'm sorry. Other times, you have whether or not an agency really is subject to the open meetings or open record act. Obviously, you guys are, so that's not an issue for you. But yeah, formation of committees or subcommittees, yeah. If you two get together and you say, now you're the subcommittee, bingo, open meetings, open record, hard, yeah, they still apply. You know, it's hard sometimes to fit that round peg in a square hole.
So, yeah, I guess the only thing left is any overall caution you'd have about hiring a search firm and doing a search for a new general manager. Maybe you've already covered that.
Between those two laws, you have to say that open meetings or open records. Records can be confidential if it's typically, but it's for the agency requesting those records. But typically, we do say if it's, I forget the exact exception, but if you are asking for records and you want to, and the agency wants to, pardon me, the private entity that you're dealing with wants it to be confidential, I would do a confidentiality agreement. And then the information that they give you would then be confidential. But the information you give to them, that's all it's a little clear.
So if we had a confidential agreement with them, would that take precedent over open meeting laws, open record laws?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No, it's just if it fits in that exception. Open records law has a specific exception for confidential information.
I see.
But it does have to fit within those exceptions.
Okay.
I can't answer everything again because I said it does require looking at all circumstances that surround it, and I don't want to say go forth and send some more when you really don't want to send.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask that question maybe a little different. In that scenario, would the information be confidential because it may be proprietary, as opposed to some strategy that they're dealing with us on?
You can't say that it's confidential if it really isn't, or proprietary if it isn't.
Well, I mean, if we're dealing with a company and what they're talking to us about is proprietary to them,
Yeah.
it would be harmful to them if it was out in the public.
Okay.
Versus them talking to us about a policy or a direction to go in whatever the endeavor is.
Okay. Are we talking open records?
Yes.
Yes. So in that case, that agency, department, that private employer, private company, whatever is going to say, here's that confidentiality statement. We want you to sign it. Typically, those kinds of things are upheld. I mean, if it's legitimate.
Okay, well, that's the question I'm getting to with the legitimacy of it. I mean, you can't put anything in that confidential agreement just because you want everything
No, you
exempted.
You're right,
Exempted. You can't, I mean,
everything is-
that company can't put everything in it, just exempt everything that they're talking about with the agency.
And typically, remember, it's the agency, the public agency that's requesting documents from
Mhm.
private entity. So if the private entity says, we'll give you that information because we want to do business with you or whatever it is, but it's got to be confidential, then that information that you have requested can be confidential.
But we're defining, we have to interpret what would be a valid confidential piece of information to meet the open
Yes,
records.
that's a good point. Now, you guys are in big-time business, so when you do big-time business, you typically do a lot of heavy-duty agreements. There's lots of lawyering
Mhm.
and so on and so forth, a lot of documents saying this is confidential, so on and so forth. And we expect it to be confidential. We're only giving it to the agency because they have asked for it under conditions of confidentiality, things like that.
Yeah.
So that's as close as I can get. Yeah, we have decisions
Yeah.
out there. For instance, I had a case where a county owned a certain business and they were looking to sell. There was a private entity buyer. They agreed that this information could be exchanged under conditions of confidentiality. Of course, somebody wanted to know what was going on. And in that case, it was upheld. I'm not going to go too far into it, but certainly we have decisions out there that say certain information can be kept confidential.
Any other questions?
I had one more, back to
Oh.
the video conferencing.
Oh, boy.
The remote aspect, does that person have to be in a public area to be, when they are remotely participating in the meeting, or is that, can it be from the privacy of your home?
It's kind of an open question. So, like, let's say you're the one that's going to be in Paducah, everybody else is going to be here. We put the notice out that says the primary location is here, and we don't tell anybody where you are, okay? But let's say, gosh darn it, your cousin finds you, and he knows where you are in Paducah. Does he get to attend that meeting? We're probably, if it ever comes up, we'll probably say, yeah, he gets to attend in that remote location.
Yeah. So
There's
that,
nothing that
yeah,
says he can't. But we're
So-
going to we haven't figured it out.
okay.
So,
So,
Steve, was your question, do we have to say where the other person is?
No, I mean, if I wanted to just stay home and in the privacy of my home, get on and Skype in. But what I think I'm hearing you might say is that if someone knows where I'm at, I'm obligated to let them come and sit.
if you're sitting in the bed, yeah,
Well, not that far.
those are difficult. So we'll have to figure
Yeah.
some of that out. But more likely, the situation is where somebody is traveling. It's the middle of the day. Can they just Skype in? Video teleconference. They probably under this probably will be able to, but what we're thinking is it's still a public meeting. If they find you, they may be able to participate through that remote location. We haven't figured it out yet, so we'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a good question. I like it. Anything else before you turn me loose?
No, I think we're ready to turn you loose. I'm not sure that you gave us a lot of clarity. You gave us more an idea that it's complex.
It is, and I appreciate that you say so.
Well, thank you very much for presenting to
My
us.
pleasure.
Okay. So, our next item, I'd like to move number 7 up, which is recognition of inaugural recipients of the Frankfort Plant Board Scholarship Program.
Hello. We're finally here. We've been talking about these scholarships for several months, and tonight's the night we're going to make those award presentations. So I'm just going to read just a little bit about the background in case Some people that are here aren't familiar with it. Recognizing the importance of post-secondary education and the need to foster local students into the workforce, the Frankfort Plant Board approved $6,000 last June for scholarships for graduating seniors. Rather than starting from scratch and reinventing the wheel, FPB partnered with the Frankfort Rotary Club, whose youth fund has provided more than $250,000 in scholarships over the past 30 years. The primary focus of the FPB scholarships is on students studying fields in career and technical education, but would also be available to students studying other career paths when applicable. A committee of the Rotary Youth Fund recently toured the Franklin County Career and Technical Center. This school serves students from all 3 public high schools in Frankfort. Its mission is to promote lifelong learning and prepare students for careers and post-secondary education. Fields of study include information technology, carpentry, health sciences, allied health, welding, pre-engineering, and automotive technology. One $2,000 FPB scholarship will be awarded to a student from each public high school in Frankfort. Applications were distributed to the Career and Technical Center as well as the high schools. There were 31 applicants for the various scholarships administered by the Rotary Youth Fund, and a selection committee reviewed and scored each application following a scoring rubric based on scholastic achievement, community service, and financial need. So, the 2018 Frankfort Plant Board Scholarship recipients are, from Frankfort High School, we have Nate Cox, who will be going to the University of Kentucky, and come on up here, studying pre-med. From Franklin County, we have Kayla Kelly, who's studying welding, and she's going to be going to the Tulsa Welding School in Jacksonville, Florida. And from Western Hills High School, we have Alex Badger, who is studying graphic design at BCTC. Is that right, BCTC? Yes. BCTC. So we're very excited to have them here. And Ms. Rosen, if you want to come up and, I know you've already given Nate his certificate, but if you want to present our other 2 students their certificates. And then I want the rest of the board to come up, and I want to get a picture of everybody with them so we can have that for posterity's sake. Already gave Nate, so we have Kayla. And if y'all don't mind to come over here and let me get a picture of the group board with all 3 of our recipients. Y'all are more welcome to second. Step up a little bit. Come in front of the podium a little bit. Yep. Thank you all. I just want to say. And I do want to thank the parents, because I know that it's a lot of work for the parents to keep your kids engaged in school, and just you should be very proud, and we congratulate you as well. I'll be in touch. You got a water bottle. You got enough. Also, a little party there.
They're not working inside the room. Could you turn your microphone on and just leave it on? Just because it's not coming out in the room, but that way.
I normally turn it off and you turn it on when you speak.
I've been getting text messages from them.
So the system is down currently, so it's not functioning the right way, so we're trying to capture as much as possible. So we're at item number 4, action item, accept electric, water, and cable financials from the May 2016 meeting. I'm sorry, 2018 meeting.
Thank you.
One more.
Good evening. Here to present the May financials. One more month and this fiscal year is over.
Okay. Well, welcome back from your trip.
Thank you. It was It was about nice to get away.
Okay, good.
So the financial statements start on page 44 of your board package. And the first page is the statements of the statement of net position, which is similar to a balance sheet in a for-profit agency. The first section lists all of our assets, with total assets on line 60 of $173.6 million. The next section shows our liabilities, with total liabilities on line 115 of $85.4 million. And then the third section shows our net position. Total net position on line 150 is $88.2 million. If you add the liabilities and the net position together, you get line 155, which is $173.6 million. That matches our assets. The next page, 45, is our cash and investment schedule. It's required by our investment policy. Just shows the breakdown between our restricted and unrestricted cash and restricted and unrestricted investments. Line 50 is total restricted cash of $1.5 million. Skip down to line 95, shows unrestricted cash of $21.8 million. The next section is investments. So the restricted investments total is on line 135, $9.2 million. Total unrestricted investments on line 145 is $118,000. And line 150 shows the total restricted and unrestricted investments of $9.3 million. Page 46 shows a snapshot of our bonds, leases, and loans payable. The balance as of May 31st is $42.6 million, with the principal amount due in 1 year just over $5 million. Page 47 shows our statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, which is similar to an income statement. This is the summary page. Page 48 through 62 shows the same detail, just in more detail by division and department. So on line 20 of page 47, in the year-to-date actual column, we have total revenues of just over $93 million. Line 50, total operating expenses of just under $67 million. Net those two together. On line 55 shows your gross contribution, $26 million. The next section is all the general and administrative expenses. Line 140 is the total of those, $20.8 million. The last section on the report is other revenue, and total other revenue on line 195 is $2.8 million. So if you take your gross contribution less your general and admin expenses plus other revenue, you get line 200, which is your net contribution for the year, $8.1 million. If you skip over to pages 63 through 65, this shows the detail of all of our bank accounts, shows the beginning balance from last month, any receipts, or summary of the receipts and disbursements. And then the detail of the disbursements is outlined in the rest of the financial section. Starting on page 66, shows the detail of all of our electronic payments for each of the bank accounts. And pages 67 through 116 shows the detail of all of our accounts payable checks. And then pages 117 through 120 shows the detail check register for our Impress checking account. Any questions?
Looks good.
One
All in
thing, Ms.
favor?
Rosen, I'd like to
Okay.
add is next month, June, closing the month we're currently in, takes some time, and usually we don't have those ready for you by the July regular meeting. So what we typically have done is brought July and August, June and July to you in August.
Okay.
So just to give the board heads up, that just takes us a couple weeks to close, and we won't have them ready by next month, but just.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Do we have a motion to accept the financials?
So moved.
Okay, and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. Our next item is public comment period. Do we have any comments from the public? Amy?
Hi, my name is Amy Benson-Haver. I am a former Assistant Attorney General for 25 years. I worked exclusively in the area of open records and open meetings, and I do appreciate the effort that's been made here tonight to give a recognition to the importance of that law. I would tell you right now, what you know and what you don't know, there's a vast gap. There are answers to a number of your questions that are direct, there's no reason to evade questions. There are answers to these questions, and I believe I could supply those answers. But I want you to know that I think it is a valuable first step. I don't think we were provided with adequate information to address all the needs of this body. No person is constrained to run for public office. No person is required to accept an appointment. But when he or she does so, he does so with a commitment. He does so with an understanding that he is bound by these laws. And these laws are difficult to comply with. They're particularly difficult in this very sensitive area in which you guys deal. But there are methods and methodologies for dealing with the law that ultimately recognize the importance of the public's right to know. And that is why I would like to suggest to you that what was provided here tonight is a starting point. But I think you should really give serious consideration to a more meaningful, in-depth discussion of the topic that would include definite answers to specific questions. Mr. Slone, with all due respect, misstated a fact. I have looked online. I see no indication whatsoever that the bill relating to video teleconferencing contained an emergency clause. So to the best of my ability, I have not been able to confirm that that is currently in effect. All bills that do not contain emergency clauses will take effect on July 14th. There is no indication in the statute that that contains an emergency clause. I don't know where he got that.
Excuse me, did you say that the bill he was talking about didn't have an emergency clause?
It did not. I mean, I don't see it. If it's, it's on the LRC website, there's no indication whatsoever that the video teleconferencing bill contains an emergency clause.
Do you know which bill that was?
Yeah, I was just looking at it. It is, sorry, House Bill 592. What I'd like to say to you is it is critical that before you take any action, before you commit anything to writing, before you hold any discussion, you have to think of the open records and open meetings requirements, and that you really need to be guided by those requirements in the conduct of every bit of the work that you do. I think general parameters for discussion are great, but we can, there's much more to be learned here, and I just want to suggest to you that a presentation of 30 minutes is simply not adequate. I've spoken for as much as 3 hours on this topic. We don't need 3 hours. I don't want, and I make no apologies for the law. I think it's a good law. I don't think anyone should be bored by this law. I think anyone who is truly committed to public service will understand the value of this law. So I will make no apologies for this law and no excuses. It is the law. It is not an ideal. It is not a suggestion. As the courts have clearly stated, it is the law. And every member of a public agency, every employee of a public agency is bound by the requirements of the statute. So I am going to once again submit to you that training of that duration is not adequate to provide meaningful assistance in understanding the legal requirements that exist under the law. That if you want a person to provide that training who really doesn't have an appreciation or broad understanding of the law based on 25 years of experience, that you can invite Mr. Slone back. I am not suggesting to you that I am the only person who can provide that training. I will tell you this, there is no one in Kentucky whose commitment to this law is any deeper than mine. I continue to work in this area of law 3 years after I left the Attorney General's office because of that commitment. 90% of what I am doing now is pro bono. I believe so deeply in this law. So if you question my intentions, I can tell you that my only goal is to facilitate compliance with the Open Meetings and Open Records law, and I would really like to be of service to this body, as I have been of service to many other public agents throughout the state of Kentucky, as well as members of the public, in ensuring compliance moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you,
It
Amy.
did have an emergency on it, though.
It does not,
When you look at the record, it does. City
Okay.
Committee 1, City Committee Sub 1.
let me see that, because I
You can
don't.
see it on, you can see this if you'd like.
Okay. Well, Amy, thank you for your comments. Do we have any other persons who want to make a public comment? Okay. We will go on to departmental reports, website customer comments. I believe there was one.
Yes, there was one.
Okay.
Yes, it's located on page
Oh.
122 of your board packet.
Okay.
Is related to us being able to, I think, extend service in Spanish.
Okay.
So do we have anyone? Because when I saw that, I wondered if we have anyone here that can do that.
Do not.
Do we have anyone like on call that could do that?
Do not.
Do we have a service? I thought at the planning meeting, we talked about that we have a service.
I'm not aware of one.
Okay.
I think that's something that we need to look at.
So you're talking about in the customer service area, there's no one that has bilingual?
Nope.
We had that problem when I was at the Sunshine Center, and also with being able to communicate with hearing impaired people through sign language. And what we did there is we contracted with someone to be on call, to be able to pretty much at a, as soon as possible to be able to respond. So I think that's something we might want to look at.
Absolutely. We can do that.
Okay. Do we need to make a motion, or we'll just note that that's an important area that we should be concerned about?
It's your pleasure, Madam Chair.
The issue that we've had is in customer service, because we have had people who we've interviewed who are bilingual, is that they don't accept our pay, the pay rate that we had. So that's why because we did currently, in this last group of people that we interviewed, we had one that actually spoke like 4 or 5 different languages, but she was not willing to come here for the pay.
I guess if we just have some general research done by the next meeting that gives us some sense of what services are out there, because it would be good to have some bilingual services come in.
Everybody's good with
I don't know if
that?
that means a whole other head count, but we
I
might
am.
find out what our options are there.
So, yeah, I think that would be important. Communication is one of the important areas for us, and
Yes.
it would be good to look into that. Okay. Cable department?
The cable report starts. The cable report starts on page 123 of your board package. The first page of the report are the customer penetration numbers. They're, basically the same direction. Looks like we've overstated broadband a little in the budget, but we're still tracking. We're not losing ground. We're just not making that budget number. And we're down a little bit on VOD, but of course that's probably been that way for, a while now. The next page is the trouble call report. Trouble call is down just a little bit versus this time last year. We're a little high on customer provided equipment. I think we're running into some old modems that customers have, some old wireless routers. We're going in and cleaning some of that up on some of these trouble calls. You will see raise lower transmit. We'll have that based on some of the temperatures we're seeing as the cable plant and the age of the active equipment. The same issue we have in the really cold January, February time frame. The next page, or actually the next 3 pages, 125 through 127, are the outage report for the month. And we almost made it with 0 outages, but on May 31st we had 2 outages. We had an afternoon storm come through, And we basically had a blown fuse in node 53. That's out Versailles Road, Shady Lane area, out past the interstate. And we had a power supply failure in node 10, and that's up there off East Main, Stedmantown area. The other thing I wanted to mention is next couple of weeks, we're going to try to launch Grit TV and BBC World News. And if the board approves tonight, Hallmark drama. So, Grit TV is over the air. I think it's can't remember. It's one of our off airs, and when we did renegotiations, they said we could take that channel. There's a lot of people that watch Antenna TV and Me TV and some of those, so it's like, Grit might get quite a few viewers. We have the space, it's free. And then BBC World News was a part of the last agreement, and it was free, so we're going to put that up on preferred cable. Be more than happy to answer any questions.
Sounds good. Have we had customers that have requested any of the stations that we're now adding?
I've had 2 requests for Grit TV. So, and I think you might have requested BBC World News.
Yes, I think so. I like it. I listen to it on the radio. So
yeah, so like I said, as part of the new agreement, it was provided, and we're just going through, and anything we can add that would bring value to the cable system, I think we should, as long as we have space. So.
Sounds good.
Right.
Okay. Moving on, customer service.
Good evening, members of the board. The customer service reports are on page 128 through 130. In May, customer service assisted 1,471 customers in the office and handled 4,188 calls. We did add 168 new accounts. And I would also like to report now that both cycles have closed for the budget signups, that we currently have 741 accounts on budget.
Is that up from last year, or?
I don't have that information. I actually just got that number of the amount of both of them. I'm not really sure, but I can get that information for you.
Okay. I was just curious about the general trend. I also noticed that we have a separate chart for the drive-through area. Would there be any way to combine drive-through with the other chart of the 2 different types of
the drive-through is, the walk-ins are actually people who are coming into customer service and setting up new services or asking questions. The drive-through is just strictly payments.
I see.
And that was information that we thought would be useful since that was something new to this building. Because even the drive-through customers, that doesn't entail any of the actual customers who are coming in and seeing the other cashiers that are inside.
I see.
So it's 2 separate groups of people.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Naturally, people are coming to me now and saying their complaints. So it prompted a question that has come. When you're on the budget and then you get off the budget, is there a big payment the next, the month you get off the budget, then the next month there's a abnormal size payment?
You mean like a true-up type?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, in May, they reconcile the budget. So, for instance, this winter, we had a really bad winter, so a lot of people's utility usage was much higher. So there could have been some instances where their budget their reconciliation month would have been higher because their average for the previous budget would have been lower because it wouldn't have had those high usage. Because we had some, really
so I mean, $600-$700. I mean, if you had and I don't know what the bill is, but the bill's $200, it could be $600-$700 when you're coming off of the budget.
It can happen, yeah, and that's one of the things that we do. We give each one of our customers who sign up for budget a list of the rules and things, and that is something that we explain to them. Because, for instance, just me personally, my electric bill, I'm in the county, so I don't have Frankfort Plain Board Electric, but my bill went from $150 to $300 over the winter, and that was over the course of 2 or 3 months. So that would be the difference in that. So, of course, my budget when I would go to re-up would be maybe $450 more because it had doubled.
Yeah, okay.
Do we not make any effort to smooth those over 1 month? Does it always come in one period of time?
We do reconcile in May, but if the customer can't afford to make that payment, we do offer payment arrangements.
I see.
So that we can take that over a few months if they need to.
Yeah, And I think May is a good month to have the reconciliation. I think a few years ago you did it like in February or something.
I think for a long time we did.
Yeah, and by having it in May, it gives you March and April when you haven't used as much, and April maybe even some of those wonderful days where you're not using either heat or AC.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think May is a good month to do it in.
And that was our thought process behind that. But of course, this year, we went straight from winter to summer. So it's may not been the case this year, but that's typically why we have done that in May.
It strikes me maybe we ought to think about giving our customers some heads up about something like that happening. A lot of those folks that might get that $600 or $700 bill, they may not be familiar with making payment arrangements or any of that, and then all of a sudden they get a $600 or $700 bill. Is it maybe we should put some thought around how to, give them a month heads up, give them some sense of the ability to.
We actually put a blurb on the bottom of the bill to let them know that their reconciliation month is in May, so that they are aware that's coming up. And of course, all that information is on their bill as to what their current balance is opposed to their budget amount.
Oh,
so that's all
the
there.
actual physical number they're going to be paying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's on there every month. So if you're on the budget, you could theoretically just kind of watch that, and if you see that it's getting higher, pay extra or call us and we can answer any of those questions as to why there's a difference. Because sometimes you're going to have, in the beginning, you might have a credit, and then in the wintertime, when you're using more heat, it's going to start to eat up that credit, and you're going to start to see a larger balance.
So if the customer's paying attention, they would notice we've got issues coming towards May.
Right,
So
I understand that. I was
it's just
trying to
kind
think
of
of a way
personal
we could
responsibility.
be a little more proactive to kind of make them aware that that's happening, especially with this last winter when it was such an odd event for folks.
And that's why we put that on the bottom of the bill, so that they know that budget reconciliation is coming up. So we do put that out there for the customers.
Yeah, we
so
encourage
that they know beforehand.
Absolutely.
Do we get a lot of phone calls about it?
We sometimes do, because we do have to make payment arrangements with customers. They'll call, and then we'll, at that time, offer for them to come in, and we can set an arrangement with them.
Folks generally seem to understand it was coming, and it's not a surprise to them, or it is a surprise to them?
If they read their bill, they would know.
Right, I guess I was trying to get some feedback from customer service. Do we get a lot of calls from folks that are surprised? Are they seeing it on the bill? Are they aware it's coming?
We do get a few. I wouldn't say that we get, but because we, of our whole customer, we have 741 accounts, so you might have a handful of those that do end up with larger bills. Okay. And of course they do call. But I couldn't give you a number, but we do around budget time get a few more calls.
But you think in general, folks, I guess what I'm trying to get to, in general, you feel like folks are aware of the data that's on the bill. They're not surprised by it.
Most of them are, because a lot of people have been on budget for, a long time. And again, when we sign them up for budget, we do explain to them that, because our budget's unique in that we have other services on there too. KU, you have just your electric. Columbia Gas, you just have gas, and we have all those other services where they can buy pay-per-view and they can do those kind of things. So we try to do our best to explain to them, all aspects of budget. Okay. Any other questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Electric Department.
Yes, Madam Chair and fellow board members. As you turn to page 131, I think most of you all are aware that we did have a good little windstorm come through on May the 31st. Those numbers will not be in this report. Just for your information, generally how that goes is if a storm lasts more than 24 hours, those numbers do not go put into a report. That's just industry standard, because it's when you're over 24 hours, that's an act of God, an act of nature, something we can't control. So those numbers aren't held against you. So as I read these numbers, knowing that we all saw the weekly reports that we had a couple of 1,000 people out there on May 31st, so you won't see those numbers here because that storm did start at 3:30 on the 31st, and we finally got the last customer back on around 5:30, 6 o'clock that Friday. So it was one of those events that's more than 24 hours. As on page 131, you'll see that your SAIDI numbers is 24.48, which is good. Page 132, once again, is your pie graph, which shows the percentages of the causes of outages. And then 133 shows the numbers that go with those percentages for a total of 27 outages. And then page 134, you'll see that we had 295 customers out for the month of May, and the Average customers per outage was 9.8. And if you have any questions on that, I will be happy to answer those.
Looks good.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Scott. So, SEPA.
Yes, Madam Chair and Board. I would like to draw your attention to pages 135 through 137 for the SEPA report. And specifically on page 136, there are 3 typos I would like to draw your attention to that I discovered. The capacity rate, energy rate, and average energy cost in the box toward the bottom. The capacity rate should be 1.943 per kilowatt. The energy rate should be, I have sheets I'll give out after the meeting if you'd like them, if you don't want to write it down. But the energy rate is 0.01317 per kilowatt hour, and that gives you an average cost with the numbers above of 0.049 per kilowatt hour. The reason for that is with our contract with the Southeastern Power Administration, their rate schedules provide for a true-up, which is based on transfers of specific power investment to plant in service for the preceding fiscal year. So they have a somewhat similar to what KU does. They have a true-up that is kind of a formula-type true-up, and they implement that on April 1 of each year. And so the old rates got left in this report by accident. This was the April report, so they changed on April 1. So I wanted to bring your attention to that. So anyway, using those corrected rates, and if you run through the numbers, you see there that this month, or the month of April, we lost $17,355 through SEPA, which gives us a total for this calendar year of $11,719 in the red. And if you look over on page 137, you will see our 20-year summary of SEPA along with the calendar year 2018 and all the other years. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Is there any hope for next month or this month?
One thing that did happen this month, if you look back on 136, you'll notice that the average energy that we received from the market was $39.15, and that was $5.75 better than we had in March. But the SEPA energy kilowatt hours that we were allocated were actually lower than it had been. They didn't generate as much electricity for various reasons in April. So we did get more per kilowatt hour, but we had less hours of energy. So next month, market performance varies month to month. Certainly as your energy market many times get better in the hot summer when everyone's trying to use energy and energy is more in demand. So that part of it could go up. Back on 135, you kind of see some of the historical graphs. Usually in the summer, we move into the positive, as you can see. Usually in the spring and the fall, we move into the negative range. So again, I think for our budgetary number for this year, with the change coming in April of 2019, where it will move and we will be able to use the power ourselves through KyMEA and therefore receive capacity credits. We expect that for this upcoming budget year that we will have, I think it was about $20,000 to the black, because the vast majority of this year is under the old system and only a little bit under the new. So next month, do we think it'll be any better? I think it will get a little better in the summer, but I'm not 100% sure. But longer term, we do expect it to be positive, and that's reflected in the budget that you've seen over the last few weeks.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay. Go on to KyMEA.
Oh, sorry, never mind.
We had our last meeting in Bowling Green, KyMEA did, on May 24th. We will be having, for those tuning in that would like to come out and attend our June KyMEA meeting, we'll be here in Frankfort in this room on the 28th. of this month, June 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And we'll have the room set up to where people can walk in and not interrupt the meeting. We'll have the same setup just across the other side of the room like we did back in January. I would encourage everybody, if you can, to come out. It's convenient that it's right in our backyard this month. So we'd love to have you come. I did provide the summary has been requested from the board to you all in email. Other than that, I'd be taking any questions you may have. But I guess the biggest thing on the agenda coming up, and I think it's all been moved back a little from what I can tell, is a purchase power agreement for our solar capacity is coming to the board at some time. And as soon as I get my hands on that, I will send it all to you for review. Okay. But I'll be asking this board, it'll be either in July or possibly August, whenever it's all marked up and everyone agrees, to be able to come back to this board, and I'll be asking for your direction on how to vote on that. But other than that, we'll have our meeting next Thursday.
Okay. And I know it will be a special meeting since it's in a different location. One thing I thought of is, could we perhaps ask for something to be considered for the agenda? And
if you have something you'd like, send it to me, and I'll ask
okay.
them. But,
yep.
Yeah.
I guess what I was thinking along the lines of was integrated resource plan, that we'd be making decisions on power we'd be purchasing in 2022, so that's 4 years away, and we don't really have a guide to help us to know how much power we might need, what the forecast looks like. I know it's been mentioned that we have kind of equivalent data in various reports, but it's not in one handbook that we can see.
Okay. If you can send me your request, I'll forward it on to the KyMEA staff.
Okay. And I guess another way of looking at it might be, how is what we have equivalent? Can we really say to the rest of the world we have the equivalent of a IRP?
Sure. If you want to send me your language or questions, and I'll see what they say.
Okay. Does any other board member have suggestions for things that we could have discussed with KyMEA? Okay. Okay. Safety.
Kim Phillips, our safety coordinator, is not here, so I'll just report that if you look on page 139 and 140 of your board packet, you'll see that there were no OSHA recordables in May and no vehicle accidents. So no news is good news on the safety front.
That's good. Okay. Moving on to water distribution.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, the water distribution reports on pages 141 through 143. We had 4 main breaks and 1 outage. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
It's probably a dumb question, but what's the difference between a main break and an outage? I know what a main break is. What's an outage?
An outage is when we don't always have to turn the water off to repair a main break. Sometimes we'll work them live. We prefer to work them live just because you have to do boil water advisories. And so if we can just repair it with a clamp and not actually have to turn the water off, we try to do that whenever we can. And there's less contamination, less possibility for contamination that way. Sometimes it's too much water, so we have to turn it off.
Thanks.
And some time ago, I asked the questions down at the plaza where all the demolition's taking place. They're using a lot of water for hoses down, to hold down dust and so forth, which is good. But my concern was whether that's being metered.
Yes, sir. The demolition company actually has 2 hydrant meters, and they're a 3-inch meter that actually attaches to the fire hose connections on the fire hydrant, and then we bill them monthly based on their usage. We have probably a dozen of those that we issue out, and different companies, contractors, asphalt contractors, sewer contractors use those.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Water treatment plant.
Good evening. The National Weather Service did make it official that May was the warmest May on record for the Bluegrass area, which includes Frankfort. That said, we treated 262.3 million gallons of water during the month of May for an average of 8.46 million gallons of water a day. It was warm. It was 9 degrees over the norm for May, but we had 6.4 inches of rain, so it was a very warm, wet month. We saw flow in the river at Lock 4 increase to 6,900 CFS, or 4.5 billion gallons of water a day. If you have any questions, be happy to answer anything pertaining to water treatment.
Sounds good. Okay,
right,
thank you,
thank you.
Julie. Okay. Moving on to item number 8, consider approving proposed water rate increase to be effective August 1st, 2018.
The last rate study that the Water Department did indicated that the money that we were bringing in our revenue fell short of our revenue requirements to pay our bills. And in an effort to minimize a large rate increase, staff recommended smaller annual incremental rates increases. As a matter of course, for this year, a public hearing was conducted on June the 5th. Oral comments were received and discussed at that time. Most of the comments received were concerning the sewer rates, of which this board does not regulate. Staff recommends that the board approve the proposed water rate increase effective August 1, 2018, or as soon thereafter as the material may be presented to the City Commission pursuant to KRS 65A 100. I'd like to remind the board this is the third of a 5-series rate increase. That also our annual incremental rate increases were requested in the past by our customers. That those revenue determinants were determined by cost of service industry best practices in accordance with AWWA methodology. And the increase amounts to $1.90 a month to the typical residential city customer. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, we had,
Excuse me.
go ahead.
The chart that's in the materials, that's complete and accurate as far as you know. We
Yes,
could
sir.
act on that if we chose to.
Okay. We had a hearing, of course, and did anyone submit other questions after the hearing up until this date, or?
I didn't receive any written comments. I'd have to refer it back to Kathy. She's saying no.
Okay. So, do we have a motion to increase the rate?
Well, I'll move that the board enact the chart of proposed water rates effective August 1, 2018. That's in our materials, the chart that I just asked David about, prices, both current and the proposed.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Unfortunately, we're in a job here where we have the misfortune of voting to increase our own utility expenses. Every member on the board is required to be a customer of the Frankfort Plant Board, not necessarily of the water. But the rates that the public is required to pay, the members of this board are also required to pay.
Yes, I guess we're faced with cost increases that we have to pass on.
One quick one. Did we get any comments from any commercial or industrial customers?
We had an industrial meeting with with the one, and we sat down and explained the rates, and we didn't really get any concerns. Is that the way you?
Did we have any feedback from industrial or commercial customers?
We had a meeting with them. Everything seemed to be fine.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Go on to item number 9. Consider approving increase to the Kentucky River Authority KRA water withdrawal fee. Hans Price to discuss that.
We heard from the River Authority at the hearing, and we heard from some other commentators. Folks had some good ideas about how the River Authority might be able to increase its revenues in the future, but unfortunately those will take some time to implement. So we're in a position to increase that rate as well. Ask that the board move to approve the KRA fee of 29 cents per 1,000 gallons as soon as possible.
I noticed in looking through the charts that we lose a certain amount of water. We take a bunch of water out of the river, and some of it's used in processing, and so we have to pay a rate that's added, if I interpreted the charts properly.
Yes, ma'am. There's a water loss adjustment. Our water loss, David Billings can comment a little bit more in depth about the water loss, but it's well within industry standard.
Good. Did anyone else have comments on the KRA increase? So do we have a motion to approve the increase?
I'll move that we approve an increase in the Kentucky River Authority water withdrawal fee from 20 cents per 1,000 gallons to 29 cents per 1,000 gallons. And the effective date would be, help me on this, David, what's the effective date?
June 20th, 2018 for the retail class, and July 20th, 2018 for the wholesale class, or as soon thereafter as we can obtain approval from PSC.
Okay, so I'll embrace those comments with my motion as to effective dates for the wholesale and retail classes.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passed. Number 10, GM search progress update and checklist for discussion. And I have some comments prepared on that. The GM search and hiring process is clearly a board project. While staff, Diane Schneider, who I'm sorry can't be here tonight, is providing human resource support, the project is a board effort that includes advice from our board attorney, James Liebman. At the June 5th meeting, the board voted to hire Tedesco and Associates to be the search firm. We discussed guidelines for hiring this firm, which included identifying costs covered in the contract and also additional costs for travel and outside expenses, including advertising as well. Upon successful negotiation, we discussed in the June 5th meeting, to include the FPB travel policy, and the board authorized going ahead with that contract in the June 5th meeting. So we now have a signed contract, and the first payment is due of $15,000. The board has been asked to submit answers to questions from John Tedesco that he posed so that he can understand our interests in develop what he calls a task list, or some parameters to define the job description, which we would then review and discuss further as part of the search process. Some members have done the written responses, and others have wanted to discuss this. Currently, those written responses are with James Liebman before sending them on to John Tedesco. Is there any further discussion that we want to have on the questions is what we should consider now. And I know there's been some concern about how to responsibly answer the questions and at the same time admit that there is friction here between our independent board and the city within the board as to how to progress, or maybe not so much how to progress, but just the current controversies with KyMEA. And in thinking about that, compared to how some organizations, utilities, find themselves needing a new general manager, and they've had graft, corruption, scandals, we have some minor things going on which are typical when someone's ready to look for a new general manager. So John has asked that we proceed with some type of search team to be in contact with them. This could be myself as the board chair and Diane, or perhaps rotating through the different board members. In the past, when we had an outside search firm, or FPB did, the chair and the vice chair handled the in-between larger group meeting discussions. So any thoughts on how you'd like to proceed?
Well, I do have some comments. As I've talked to you, I'm not really happy with how we've proceeded with this, simply because we selected a firm and 5-6 days later we've made a payment, and no board member, at least I don't got any advanced knowledge that, one, the contract was signed, secondly, the contract, a payment was going to be made on it. None of that came to me prior to it happening. And I have a problem with that. In light of, before I came on the board, the big issue was around Reed Smith and the exclusivity that some board members had with that as opposed to the others. And I'm not going to be a part of that type of scenario as it relates to this, because in the motion that was said last week, Walt said it in the motion that every member would be copied on all communications, which I assume copied means real time. If you send an email and copied, it's real time. On all communications. I have a problem with James being in the negotiation. That negates what I asked before. Ms. Schneider, has the professionalism, the knowledge to do this. There's nothing that's transpiring, as I see it, potentially will transpire, that it couldn't go to her, that we have to go to an attorney with. There's nothing that I have to hide from anything that's being transpired. The only thing potentially is why I asked the guy from the Attorney General's office is what are the potential things? And I assume that would be the privacy of any potential candidates and things. But as far as the communications between payments to them, when they were made, and those, I have nothing to hide with that. So I don't understand why we're now moving all these correspondences that were going to Ms. Snyder are now coming to James. I don't understand, because she can handle that. She's professional, and she's competent. So I have no problem with that. But I also have a problem with all the board members aren't in on the conversations with the firm. Now, if it was just going to be the chair doing it, I can see that everything comes through you. But the chair is not just doing it. The chair is not just communicating with them. When I see questions coming from other board members from the firm, that tells me other people are conversing with the firm versus outside of just the chair. And since we're responding now to doing that, but that was supposed to be done from the onset, because that's what the motion was about the first time.
Okay, well, I think maybe there are a couple inaccuracies there. First, James was not involved in negotiating with the firm. That was myself and Diane, and I invited Walt to be along too. So we called John Tedesco, we spoke with him. We resolved the issues that were raised in the June 5th meeting, and we went ahead with the contract, which is what we discussed in the June 5th meeting.
Excuse me, but in the June 5th meeting, it was to be negotiated, and then my understanding was to be brought back to the board for board approval.
No, I specifically stated in the motion, how do we word this? And Steve and I discussed this, how do we word this so this doesn't have to come back to us? And the consensus between Steve and I was approval per successful negotiation.
That wasn't an actionable language you were using, that was going to be that way. We didn't say it didn't have to come back to the board. We were expecting it to come back to the board because there were negotiations that were going to have to be done to reconcile what we wanted and what the firm proposed.
But we did reconcile those things.
You did.
Well, we discussed the $45,000. We discussed the travel policy of the plant board. We achieved both of those things. We put some money into the idea of how much there would be costs in advertising and estimated the cost for travel.
The operative word there is we, not I.
We meaning
not the
group of us on the 5th. We discussed that.
So, James, do you feel like there was any additional action required before that contract was executed based on what was the motion that was approved on the 5th?
Well, first to clarify, I have not talked to Mr. Tedesco. I have not negotiated anything on something like this. It's not a purely legal matter. I do what the board instructs me to do, no more and no less. My understanding was that those contract details would be negotiated, and if it was met with everybody's satisfaction, and that's a bad choice of words, the board members speaking to him and to his company that you'd have a contract.
Well, utilizing James's explanation here, so if it was run by the board members prior to the signing, whether it be a call or what, I guess we couldn't because of open records, but come back here, if there was some way we could have seen the contract, the negotiated contract, prior to the signing, didn't have knowledge that it was being signed prior to its signing, didn't have knowledge that you're making a payment prior to the payment. We didn't.
Okay, the payment has not been made, is that my understanding?
And all those details are also in the proposal.
But it was supposed to be made last week, wasn't it?
Ideally, it would have been, yes.
All right, okay.
I'm not making a payment until this board votes on the contract.
Okay, has everyone read the contract? Everyone received it?
No, I didn't read the contract.
You did not read the...
No, it was signed. It was a foregone conclusion. It was signed.
Well, all this seems really confusing to me. We specifically discussed this on the June 5th meeting. I specifically stated it. You agreed this is the way to word it so it doesn't have to come back to the
I didn't
the
say
board
it.
for
No,
approval.
you didn't hear me say anything about it not coming back.
But
that's what I said, and that was my perspective of what I was trying to integrate there. And
we need to speak
Diane has certainly responded that she was following what she perceived to be normal activity in all of her years of service with the plant board. James, our board attorney, also feels that we had done the necessary approval to move forward with the proposal.
My point,
all of this seems odd to me.
You're illustrating my point. My point is the chair is not leading this effort. It sounds like you're leading it because you're talking about all the points.
Just because I made the motion.
The interpretation with the attorney and
well,
that's my point. Is I feel excluded.
Well, I think you're reading a lot into it that's not there.
Well, I'm probably gun shy from some of it. Yes.
But you could go back and look at the video that we met.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, but we met the requirements as we discussed them.
The motion included all board members be copied on all correspondence. They didn't.
Well, they are.
That's what the video said.
Well, but you have been.
After the fact. If you copied it, it's real time. It means once you sent the email, I immediately will get a copy of it.
Right. Well, didn't you?
The contract?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, you did receive the contract.
I did receive the contract.
Okay.
After it was signed.
Right. And the discussion that we had on June 5th said, we're having this discussion so it doesn't have to come back to the board. We very carefully did not say the amount because we, assuming that they could watch that, we don't have a negotiated position. We asked them if this was their best offer. We discussed travel policy. We met all the requirements that we discussed in the June 5th meeting.
I've made my point, I'm through.
But since in the June 5th meeting, the contract was going to be negotiated as far as travel expenses were concerned.
It was.
And we met that. The one criteria we mentioned in the June 5th meeting was their acceptance of our travel policy, which they did, so we were 100% on
But
that.
we didn't have that information to be able to say that, yeah, a couple $1,000 for travel is okay with me.
No, the motion that was made was that they agreed to adhere to our travel policy. There weren't specific amounts associated with it. It was just that they agreed to adhere to our travel policy. And they agreed to adhere to our travel policy.
And the travel expenses are extra expense that are beyond the contract.
I realize that.
Okay.
But if I understood correctly, that was what Steve was trying to get negotiated, so we were not given an enormous expense bill for, say, travel, that they got the ticket the same day or whatever.
Well, they said they tried to do the best, but they're only planning on coming once. And
again, the only stipulation in the June 5th meeting was that they adhere to our travel policy. Not specific amounts, not anything else, just that they adhere to our travel policy. And that's what we all agreed to, and that's what we voted for.
I disagree with that. And I'm trying to find the actual wording of the motion, and I, of course, can't find what I'm looking for. I guess just, and I don't know, you all can agree or disagree, but since there is question as to whether or not we actually approved the contract that was signed by you, I think we need to vote to approve the contract.
Okay. Have you read the contract?
I've read it, yeah.
Okay.
I read it.
Does it meet your requirements? Are you accepting it?
I don't have a problem with it. I think it should have been brought to us and discussed publicly before it was signed. But the contract itself, I do not have a problem with. I have a problem with the procedure, not the contract itself.
So a motion at this point could be to ratify the contract. There's been a contract signed, is that correct?
That's correct,
Both
yes.
sides, both Plan Board
Yes.
representative and
Yes.
Tedesco?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So, are you making a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion that we, I don't have it in front of me or the date of it or anything, but everybody knows what we're talking about. So,
Correct, the Tedesco
move
contract.
that we as a board ratify that contract with Mr. Tedesco's firm.
Thank you, Ralph. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess just to make sure, so we're reapproving the contract that we already have and we're not changing anything?
Now, we're approving the contract, not selecting the vendor.
Well, we approved the proposal, but there's no reason to get back in the weeds of that. So.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I just want to eliminate any.
Sure, that's fine.
So we're approving the
Erring on the side of
contract.
caution, sure.
Just,
Yeah.
there's a contract, and we're going to act on whether or not we're going to ratify that and
That's right.
recognize it as in force.
Okay.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, we have one opposed, 4 in favor. Okay, the next thing we should discuss.
Ma'am,
Yes?
let me just make one point that I should have made a minute ago. If the company submits a travel expense that violates the policy of the board, the board would obviously have an option not to pay it.
Okay.
So.
As with all the expenses, I believe the conversation was any expenses that would come up that were incidental would all be driven by us, not by the firm.
So, that's a good point.
Could we
Yeah.
discuss the questionnaire a minute?
Yes, I was just thinking maybe if it's necessary, should we vote on actually signing the check and sending the check to them?
As long as just speaking for myself,
Okay.
as long as the contract has been approved by this board, I have no problem signing the check for it.
Good. So you don't feel, does anyone feel that we need to have a motion to pay them? Okay, then we'll go ahead. And Don, you wanted to discuss the questions?
Yeah, I filled it out like
Yes.
you asked and sent it to Diane, who I guess sent it to James. I really think that we should discuss, at least, I don't know that we need to discuss maybe every single question, but I don't understand how Mr. Tedesco is going to know who we want as a candidate for the GM by 5 of us, or however many do it, send him the answers to these questions when he very possibly has 5 different answers. So how does he synthesize that into what we're looking for to be able to send us a candidate? We don't have a job description that we've discussed. To me, how can we have an agency to send us candidates for the GM position when we have not discussed amongst ourselves what it is we're looking for in a candidate for the GM? You know, one of the questions is I guess their educational background, how many years of experience. You know, one person might have 2 years of experience, another person might have 15 years of experience. So is he looking for someone in a range of 2 to 15 years experience? I mean, you know, that's a pretty broad thing. Somebody may say, I think the GM should be an engineer. Somebody else could say, no, I really don't think he needs to be he or she needs to be an engineer. He or she just needs to have management experience within the industry. I just think that those are important qualities in looking for a GM that we as a board need to come to some kind of consensus on as to what we're looking for, rather than expecting this agency to conjure up the magic GM candidate when we haven't even discussed what it is we're looking for.
My impression from reading the process that was defined in the proposal was that it was just that. It was a process. And that this questionnaire was the beginning of that process, not the end of that process. And that this was the beginning of him facilitating the conversation with the board to get us to that consensus.
But
so
how
I didn't
is
have the
he
impression
going-
from looking at that process that anything about this was final. I think my impression was this was the very cursory beginnings of helping us come to a consensus on what that candidate requirement list would look like.
Okay, but without him, I think part of that process, and I think part of the emails that went back and forth, was that he would have a call with the search committee, which we do not have a search committee, you know, to further discuss what it is we want. I think if we're going to have a call with Mr. Tedesco, it needs to be a special meeting in which we're all sitting here and we all talk to him. Because as what Mr. Mason was saying, I've been there, done that. And I think the whole board needs to be involved in this process, and it not be limited to 2 or 3 people driving the bus. Because if that happens, then that's the same thing that happened with E3. It's the same thing that happened with Reed Smith. And I don't want to see that same thing happen again with hiring the GM.
And just to correct that, it is absolutely not the same thing that happened with Reed Smith, and it's not the same thing especially that happened with E3. We had everyone involved. We had pre-release versions of the report. Everybody got their comments in there. It was a very dynamic back and forth for 45 days before that report was presented. It completely mischaracterizes those engagements to suggest that it was driven by any individual. And it also inappropriately impugns those agencies. I mean, these are not to get too far on a tangent, but these are massive, internationally respected companies. And to imply that they would give us not industry best practice advice based on pressures from a small community in Kentucky for $50,000 is just ludicrous.
Well, let me ask you this, because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because all I had was knowledge prior to getting on the board was, I guess, Alpha sitting over at the State Journal and reading about Reed Smith and then certain board members not allowing other board members to see some of the Reed Smith material.
And that's not the case at all.
Oh.
We spent months trying to go through exactly what we were going through tonight with the open meetings.
That some board members did not let, who were privy to some of the Reed Smith material, did not allow other board members to see.
It's not the case at all.
Oh, come on,
It
Walt.
is not
When
the
you
case at all.
had possession of that report from we would have not even known you had that report if we hadn't had the invoice that the invoice said. Never once did either of the two of you or James share that report with Ralph and I. When you had it, you knew about it. I sat here in this meeting continually asking for information on Reed Smith, and you stonewalled and said...
And I had a 2.5-hour meeting with you.
And we did not discuss. No, I am sick up to here of hearing the infamous meeting at the Paul Sawyer Library when the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the GM search back then and a job description, and I asked about Reed Smith, and you said we'd be having a teleconference in the December meeting, and that never happened.
That's right. I've been trying to say.
But you had possession of that report that you knew about, that you did not mention the first time to me or to Ralph.
That's simply not the case.
Yes, it is the case. How can you say?
Because I know it's not. All of your speculation doesn't change the fact.
Can I call a truce?
Please. We're pretty far off topic.
Let's get back on the subject of trying to find out what we're going to tell this guy what we want in a GM.
Thank you,
okay?
Ralph.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
So the questionnaire is just to get a feel for who's on the board, so they can start developing materials that would help us define the qualities we want in a general manager. And John Tedesco has asked for, do we want to have a search team? It could be myself and Diane. It could have rotating board members. We couldn't have more than 2 at a time. We could do that type of approach. And that would be a team that would get things going, and then we would have board meetings with all 5 of us discussing what we think about things, but the smaller group would just keep things going to get to that point.
I wouldn't mind having just call meetings. I mean, but I don't know why the rush. I mean,
Having a small meeting, small limited number of board, I don't think it's going to work here because I just think the whole board needs to participate. If it takes a special meeting or what it is to talk about what we're looking for.
Okay. But there's some small preparation meetings before that. Would you agree that those could happen, or do you want to see
Well, I think we've got to be careful on that because we get this suspicion.
Okay.
I think all the meetings, little special meetings or whatever, need to be special meetings of the full board.
So, and going back to why the rush, well, that firm, the firm we chose, does things on a very quick time frame. They do a small number of clients at a time, and they move quickly. And that is their focus, the way they operate. So I would propose that we choose a time still this week to call and discuss things with John. Once we have sent our answers to him, he's willing to do that within a 2-day period. So we could have a meeting, say, Friday afternoon. Call him. He is located in California, so we'd want to make it the afternoon because we don't need to have him up at 6 in the morning. To discuss the responses to our questionnaires, our answers to our questionnaires and his proposal of how to start to define the job description. He refers to it as a checklist because they work at it as a process. So would it be feasible to get responses back to him tomorrow morning? And then we could have a meeting on Friday?
Responses are all in James' hands, is that right?
The ones
So
that
they
have,
sent
to
out?
my understanding, the ones that have been done, yes.
Okay, they can be
So-
sent out.
But I've not done anything.
Okay, so how many responses do you have? I know I sent you my newest version.
I have whatever you sent me, and I'm not even sure the answer to that because I was waiting for the board's direction.
Okay, so I know you have mine and you have, I believe,
You don't have
Dawn's.
mine yet.
Okay.
So you don't.
Good.
But I'm philosophically opposed to utilizing James for this when we have a competent HR staff that can do that. There's nothing in those, you just read one of the questions.
Mhm.
What's in those questions that Diane cannot send to the firm? Why are we, what's the purpose of James doing it versus Diane?
Well, can we agree to let ask Diane to do it? To do this?
Well, that's wrong, but the chair has directed James, she's taken it out of Diane's hair and
Okay.
directed those to James.
A couple things there. First of all, the search for the GM is one of the primary things that the board does, and it should be led by the board, and James is the attorney for the board. I know some people were concerned about their answers to the questions and wanted them to remain between us and the search firm.
I have
and
no
that's
problem
why
with
James.
whoever sees my answer to the
Okay,
questions.
good. I know other members had different feelings about that.
My feeling was just if one or two members were going to see it, then all the members needed to see it.
Well, at this point, no members have seen other members' replies. So that's a different question.
Again, my problem is what I said from day one I was here.
Mhm.
Utilize the professional staff that we have.
We are utilizing Diane.
Duplicating services is inefficient.
Okay, I don't believe we're duplicating services.
Diane can send them just as well, as easy as James can send them.
I mean, come on, you sent them to James because you were trying to get around the open records law and thought if James held them, that they could be preliminary, and then Alfred wouldn't have access to them. You said it in the email, basically.
That's right. They are preliminary in their draft, just like when we review the sitting GM. We don't send that directly to the State Journal or anywhere else. It goes to James, and it's compiled by James.
Say that again?
When we review a sitting general manager, we do an annual review, and you haven't been on the board long enough to know all of that, but we do a review, like a performance appraisal. And we do that individually, and it's compiled by James, and an aggregate is developed from that. That was what I was aiming for. I felt this was on the same level as that. James, do you have a comment there?
No, again, I would do this as directed by the board. No more and no less. I didn't volunteer.
So, Diane, as part of staff, there is some concern about giving unfair advantage to employees, current employees that might want to apply for the job, or appearing that way to outside candidates.
And as I said to you in conversations, I don't think if anyone from the plan board or Frankfort applies for this job, they already have an advantage and knowledge of the culture, the operations, and everything else that relates to the plant board. So again, I'm not sure what added advantage we would be giving plant board staff who want to apply for this job by letting Diane send the email to Desco and say, here are the questionnaires. Every question on that questionnaire, I guarantee every one of these staff already knows the answers to them. Knows generally what the answers are.
Generally, yes. Specifically, no.
But what difference does it make if they do know specifically? They aren't the one, I mean, going through Diane, as Steve is saying, Diane isn't going to be making the decision as to the GM candidate that's hired. We are. So it doesn't matter that she's involved in the process. She's not making the decision.
And confidentiality is the hallmark of the HR area, confidentiality. So who better in the agency to utilize for confidentiality than the HR place?
Well, when we do a GM performance appraisal, why does it go to James and not to?
I have no idea.
Well, because the GM is an employee of the board, essentially. And that is why.
But I think that's apples and oranges. I don't see the connection.
You want to call a truce again so we can move on?
Okay. Well, what we need here?
The Paris Accords.
I think for fairness, Diane needs to know what to expect. She doesn't need to be put in the middle between board disagreements. I understood last month that Diane would handle the process. I had no idea that she'd already been circumvented. She's been very professional with me. She's never shared one thing with me. She's never copied me on one email. Only thing I've gotten from her is I said, how much is it going to cost? Because we haven't talked about that.
Right.
But we'll talk about it here in a few minutes.
And that is the other part of this is, as we establish better relations with staff, you know, I called Diane last week because I know one of the emails that I sent out, she could probably say, I'm part of this. And I called and said, this is not about you at all. But she was in that predicament because of what we're doing now. She had that thought in her mind because of what we're doing now. It's unnecessary if you let a professional HR person, what is it, SHRM certified, or whatever that acronym is, do her job.
I think you're referring to her email concerning signing the contract that we followed.
That's irrelevant
standard.
what email it is. It's just I know that she had a sense of concern. I felt it without even talking to her. So I made the call to her to assure her that my frustrations were not with her. But that scenario would not even materialize if we would just been consistent, staying with Diane to shepherd us through this process.
Okay,
Please call it
Diane.
so we can
Okay, Diane is not actually shepherding us through it. This is a board-led process, and Diane is our consultant or our assistant.
I would think that Mr. Tedesco would be comfortable in communicating with our HR person.
He is. In discussions with him, he has suggested that having a board person as the key contact is how he prefers to work. That's what he's done with other boards. Some boards range in size up to maybe 24, and there you need something like a search team. He felt dealing with 5 directly is manageable, and he sees the human resources person as important, but not in a leadership role.
Sort of conduit, so to speak.
That's
Correct.
the word I used last meeting, conduit.
Okay. So, what we need to do is formalize how we'd like to proceed.
I think as I think some of us have said here that when we have a contact with John Tedesco, his firm, we schedule it around a special meeting. We just have to do, who can't be here, won't be here, but
Okay.
schedule
Well,
meetings.
Would it work to have a special meeting on this Friday afternoon?
What
Does that-
time?
I'm thinking 2 o'clock, but I'm open to suggestion.
I had something Friday afternoon, but I'll cancel it.
Okay. And I guess we'd have to check with John to make sure it works for his schedule, but we could give him a range of hours, perhaps, somewhere between 1 and 4.
Oh, that's good for me.
Okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and contact John and say we want to have a meeting. If people can try to get their answers to the questions into him. James, if you can send the responses you have on to John, if that meets with everyone's approval. Diane is out this week anyhow. She's at a conference. So.
I think that should be voted upon or
Okay.
to avoid any future controversy.
Okay, thank you.
That's my suggestion. I don't have a
Okay.
vote.
Okay,
Or decided Friday, I don't know.
okay. I'll go ahead and make a motion that James send the responses to the Tedesco questions on to John Tedesco, and that we have a meeting with John sometime Friday afternoon, and I'll finalize that time. And we have a second. All in favor? Opposed?
No.
Okay, is there anything we can do to,
The no part is James handling the things. I'm okay with the meeting, but you
Okay.
included James handling the questionnaires, and I'm philosophically opposed to doing that, as I've
Okay.
said 20 times today.
okay,
now.
good. Well, we have a motion that we passed, that James will send those on. So I know John Tedesco said he'd be happy if you want to send yours individually. If you're happier with that, you could do that. Okay. But encourage everyone to try to get the responses into John as early as possible tomorrow or tonight. Okay. So there's one other thing that I've been thinking about concerning a search firm, and that's the possibility of also having the search firm look for a chief technology officer, someone who would focus programs involving implementation of things like AMI. What are other good examples? Higher level internet type applications. What would you add to that?
Well, we have that missing role now, and I believe in the response he sent that we're able to get a 5% discount if we do those searches at the same time. Was it 5% or 5? What was the number? I forget now.
It was 5% discount off of the $45,000.
Yeah, there was some discount associated with doing the searches
as a second
concurrent.
search.
So
like-
we have that position out there. If we want to move forward with doing both at the same time, we can save a little money.
Well, I have to talk, whenever I was hired as GM, the thing was that the new GM would help decide the organizational structure. And right now, that position does not exist in the organizational structure. So I just want to point that out, that it's not a current open position right now.
Yeah, and we voted in
Well, AGM and Telecom is
October.
open, regardless of what you call it. That position is still there. It's still open.
But we voted in October that the GM would handle any organizational restructuring and the hiring of the full-time telecommunications
That is true.
assistant GM.
It's something we could reconsider, which is what I'm proposing, is that we reconsider that and consider a search firm for a chief technology officer. Okay. So, would anyone like to make a motion to entertain that?
I'd rather wait till we got a general manager.
Okay. Well, it looks like we don't have enough votes on that. Do you have any comments, Ralph?
No, but backing up, we have a special meeting this Friday afternoon at a time yet to be decided. Is
Right,
that
and
correct?
I will work on that.
Meeting would be here, is that correct?
It makes sense to me unless you had another location in
No, I'm
mind.
just asking for
Okay.
clarity.
Okay, we could possibly do the library.
What's the point when we have it here?
Yeah. We, I think we need to get the time set fairly soon because some of us have day jobs.
Right, yep. Well, I will call John right after the meeting to see if we can resolve that. And I see this as a teleconference, which, James, is that legal that we just do a voice teleconference as a special meeting?
I got to think about that.
I think I think we have an expert still in the audience here, but I thought that the AG attorney said that as long as we were open, the speaker did not have to be, on his side or her side.
Right, because it's not a board member.
Well, open
Okay.
session, yeah, I don't know that there would be any problem.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to bring up if there are any questions. But I will resolve the time as immediately as possible. Okay. So.
You'd have to have a suitable notice, of course.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, we'll get that going. And that's a 24-hour notice, so there'd be time to do that once I have a time from John. Okay. I guess we're ready to move on to the next topic, which is the budget. Consider approval of the 2018-19 budget and accept the 5-year plan.
Can we take 5 before we do that?
Oh, that's a good idea. Great, let's do that. Let's resume at, say, 7:30.
Thank you.
Good. Our next item is the budget. And David, where do we start with that?
I say we move for approval.
Okay.
Could I offer a suggestion?
Yes.
Do you think we could go through this budget as far as what we want to do to it, but wait until Friday and approve it so we can have time to let the things that we put in it out?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, good idea.
So I guess, does the board have any additions to the budget or any subtractions that you would like to have, just for the public's benefit? So this is not as quick as it seems. We've had a special meeting it's just been 2 weeks, January 5th and June 5th and June 7th. We had meetings that are out there on our, if you're a FPB TV subscriber, cable TV, you can find it on channel 10 FPB TV and also on our YouTube channel. We distributed this final budget to the board back in May 23rd, had individual meetings with the board, individually members throughout, some combined, send out additional information throughout this whole process. And so we're about 28 days of a process we've walked through here. We've sat and presented what we believe we need to operate. And I tell you, there is a great story out there, if anybody's writing stories in the room that would like to talk about, because we did have to approve some rate increases today, but the fact that we are not having a rate increase for our electric power for any of our electric customers in this budget or the foreseeable future, I've got a bulletproof list that I go through. I've been with this company since 2012, June of 12, and this is the most financially solid state that I've seen this company in since 12. Now, it's all in all about having a solid company, which is extremely important. It's about balancing that with delivering economic, competitive, reliable services for all services, rates for all customers, for all services. But I think we've been able to accomplish our ability to keep competitive rates. In this budget in 5 years, I think it's an outstanding number that we are going to reduce our debt service by 40% in the next 5 years. Reducing our interest expense by 37% in the next 5 years. Being able to pay for advanced metering infrastructure, which will bring value to the company and to our customers in cash without borrowing any more money. And what that means is that debt service not being paid by future folks over a 20, 30-year bond. I could go on, but I look forward to hearing what you would like to see different, what you'd like to have added, and then we could talk about that at another meeting or however you would like to do it.
Well, I think running through all the things that board members have asked to be additions would be helpful.
I got 4 items.
Okay. Would you like to start?
Not all of them are financial. The first one is sort of, as we approve a budget, I think board needs more oversight. So whatever budget comes out, I think we need to add to the motion that, and I don't know what the number is. I put a number here, but the numbers is debatable. but some language that says any budget amendments, transfers at or above, I use 10K, could be different, shall be reported to the board for information and oversight purposes. Any budget amendment above 40K must be reported to and approved by the board. Again, as the sheet says, the current the current language doesn't give any mandatory board oversight or mandatory board approval. Second thing, any monies realized from the sale of surplus property shall be reported to the board for information or oversight purposes. That money, I'm assuming, goes to fund balance. It just gives the board information about what's going on with the budget that you don't normally ask for and may not think about. It also keeps the board apprised of planned board inventory, because once they say something is sold, you may prompt a question about what, how many more trucks do you have? Are you going to need trucks or whatever? Third thing, any unspent money from any area at the end of the fiscal year shall be reported to the board. And I assume maybe it does. It becomes the beginning balance for the next year. Maybe it does. Maybe it all goes back in a pot and starts over. But it gives you an idea how, I won't use the word efficiency, but how well staff met their budget projections at the beginning of the year. Now, the fourth thing is financial. I'm proposing that all planned board employees get a raise of 3%, 2.75 to 3%. The reason I'm saying that is the city's probably getting around 2, the state employers are probably not getting any. The environment in Frankfort is not getting pay raises. So therefore, when they look at their check, as the lady at the June 5th meeting said, they look at their checks not going up, our rates are going up, and it looks as if planned board employees, however professional, I know they do a good job, are getting basically effective 4.4, 75% are getting about a 4.4% annualized raise, 25%, and Dave, correct me if my percentages are wrong, are probably going to get around a 2.75% raise. I say, in this environment in Frankfort, that's just another grade at ratepayers who are looking for relief and seeing, that's an indication that we aren't seeing that we need to give them relief. Now, 1%, David, correct me if I'm wrong, 1% equates to about $140,000. And let me back up and say this. If I've understood anything here, and I may not understand this, there are 3 things that drive this planned board budget, if I can make it that simple, if I'm understanding. You got the expenses to run the operations of the university, of the planned board. You got the rate that the ratepayers pay, and then you got the administration. Now, if I'm prioritizing those things, and financial stability, the financial stability, the rate, and the expenses. If I'm prioritizing those, financial stability will be first. Ratepayers are going to be second, and the administration perhaps is going to be third. So when I look at this budget and try to determine what, if anything, that we might be able to do differently, I have to look within the administration, because if I touch the financial stability, David's fund balance that he just talked about, or if I hit the ratepayers, as we heard people criticize and be critical of rates being raised, then those are some negatives that go with that. Now, there's a negative with the pay raise, but I think that's the more viable, it's the most public conscious way to go, is to bring the annualized pay raises down to something closer to what 85% of Frankfort is getting. Now, in that 140,000, I only have one thing that I would like to do. The other thing is David mentioned the uniforms, which is about 30. So that's $170,000. No rate paid, no rate going up, no fund balance being touched. All I would want to do out of that is, David mentioned that the I guess the debt service on the water, on the reservoir is of 500,000? Is it 500,000 on the, is that what's being generated by the money for the,
It's the principal and interest and debt covenants were included in the cost of service budget.
is 500?
I don't remember the number.
Are you speaking, sir, of the increase that the board just approved, what that looks like in dollar value?
Yeah, I think so.
We have over on our budget, this is page 24, line 45, it's approximately $436,000.
Okay, 436,000. I propose to give, not changing the rate, leaving the rate as is, but proposing a one-time rebate that would be paid to ratepayers 10%, one-time 10% rate off of that rebate to ratepayers that would be paid at the end of the fiscal year. So therefore, anybody that was in that fiscal year would get proportionally whatever that 10% represents, which is $40,000 or whatever the 10% may be. And I'm still leaving $100,000 on the table for whatever else board members may or may not want to do.
I think I got lost there. You're talking about limiting raises but giving money back to ratepayers?
What you have in this budget is built assuming everybody gets 75% gets a 4.4 annualized pay rate. The other 25 is built in this budget that they'll get a 2.75 pay rate. Now, what I'm saying is that the pay rate should be back down and maybe to 2.75 or 3, somewhere right in that. That frees up at least $140,000 out of the administrative budget, not out of the expenses of the ratepayers, not out of taking it out of fund balance. This is money that's being taken out of the running of the operations, the administration. Basically, payroll is where it's coming from. And I'm saying if I could use, if my proposal, if that was accepted, I would like to show the lady that was here and was worried about that rate increase we did, the lady that was handicapped and was elderly. I'd like to show her that the plant board is going to start trying to address those things by looking inward as opposed to looking outwardly. Now it's not financially prudent to do a permanent 10% reduction on the rate. But you can do, to negate 10% for 1 year, I can give them a rebate of 10% at the end of the fiscal year, which would cost me around $45,000 out of that money that I'm just talking about.
Wow.
So what is that going to amount to the average?
It's not. It's more. It's probably going to be more symbolic than now. But it's showing that we are starting to look at the ratepayers' issues with rates going up. It's not. It's not going to be something where I can go out and buy a pair of shoes or a dress or a pair of pants or whatever with it. But it signals that the plant board is starting to look and is sensitive to the rates that the ratepayers are paying. And maybe if we start this practice and start looking at it, maybe we can do it another year. Because the other thing in this budget is every position is funded at 12 months, while every position may not be filled for 12 months. So there is money perhaps coming.
Well, there's several things there. We budget for new positions or any changes on base what we think, talking to the supervisor, what do you think real life's going to happen here? Is this new customer, a new employee or employee change? Is it coming in January? Yes, January. Okay, we budget 6 months. We don't budget a change automatically for everybody at the start of the year. I think I want to make sure that it's clear to customers as we talk through this tonight that we are sensitive always about the money we spend, that it's not just now, we're always sensitive to that. I'm a customer. My families are customers. We pay the same rates. This board made a bold decision back in 2014 to leave our wholesale power supplier, Kentucky Utilities, and what that's resulting in is no rate increase starting in May 1 of 19 for the foreseeable future. I think that's something the customers need to fully understand. That's huge. We're talking about as far as the eye can see. If this board makes the steps that we've recommended in this budget, we're telling our customers, industrial all the way down to the smallest household in this town, you can guarantee the only thing that will make your electric rates change is your usage and fuel adjustment, because that is something that varies. When it comes to water, what we've shown in this budget is we've got a plan based on a cost of service study that takes rates up for the next 2 years through 21, but then in this budget, it levels out. We pay debt off and we do some things that, not saying we won't have a rate increase in 2022, but what it looks like is pressure starts to release as we pay debt off. Our cable telecom division, the only thing that is going up in this next fiscal budget is a retrans fee, which we can't control. There are no other services that increase in this 5-year plan in telecom. So I think as our customers, I hope watching and listen to this and get the news of this, is that there are a lot of positive things in this budget. I think, Mr. Mason, administratively, I think giving a rebate back is difficult. People are coming in and out of the system all the time. Someone might move here from San Diego, California, and move back that year and having to hunt people down. It's just, administratively, it's difficult.
Well, agree. I agree that it is difficult, but that's why you have computers and programs to do the projections on that. And all the things you said, David, are correct. I mean, the Plan Board is doing a lot of good things. But as I said at the last meeting, the budget meeting, when we spent the $1 million or whatever it is that Tanglewood, nobody blinked here. When we start to propose whatever things that we're going to propose here, nobody's going to blink, because those monies are going to come from the fund balance. And remember the 3 prongs I said. You can take it from the fund balance, you can charge it to the ratepayers, or you perhaps can take it, find some money within the administration to do it. And perhaps what I'm saying is minuscule and symbolic, but the symbolism is important, because the Plan Board, as the lady said at that meeting, and she made an impact on me. She talked about the building, being the perception of the building. She talked about what we can get when we want to get it. So I think we need to change that picture as it relates to what the Plan Board is projected, the perception out there. We need to see that we are making some sacrifices too. We're not trying to maintain the fund balance, but when we really need something badly, we go to the fund balance and get it. And we're not trying to do something where we have to, the real legitimate things like David and the reservoir, that's legitimate. We got to raise the rate to handle those kinds of things. I understand that. But some things we do are discretionary. And I'm thinking that discretion needs to come from the administration portion sometimes, as opposed to coming out of your fund balance. So you're doing great things, I agree.
The one thing I might comment, if you don't mind, on the rebate on $40,000 over all of our customer bases, all the different customer classes, if you gave...
That was water. That was water.
Oh, just water.
Because that's what I was speaking to the lady and David.
I was pleased by the reaction to our customers when they realized that a lot of them were standing up. Now, don't get me wrong. For an average residential customer in this town using 4,000 gallons, your bill will go up $1.90 per month. Several people stood up and were thought that we controlled sewer rates, and when they found out we did not, said, "Well, my goodness, $1.90, I can handle that." Now, I'm not saying that we should just say you need to handle it, because no, we don't want rates to go up. Period.
You missed my point. My point is purely to show that we are starting to feel some of the stuff that the ratepayer feels. They don't think we feel that now. They don't think we feel that. And this is a way to do that, to start that thought process, the reversal of that thought process, to show that we are. Because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but have y'all looked at the administrative part when
Absolutely.
Not you, has the board gone deep into the administrative budget to what we're doing right now? You know, and thought about where monies might lie within the administrative budget that could be utilized other places. So that's been, I'm looking at you, my fellow board members, to ask I'm asking you the question, you all the question. Because that's where as I look at it, the money comes. If you want to maintain your fund balance for financial viability, bond covenant reasons, and it's where, the coverage, you don't want to hit the ratepayers with rate increases. If you want to do some other things, it's got to come. That's the only place.
So what I hear you saying is you're asking the board to really any increase we want to make it budget neutral as possible. Finding offsetting cuts or some other way to.
Well, I think, and that would have to come from the administrative budget. But the proposed pay increase is to keep it in line with Frankfort, Franklin County, because, they see that you have a 4.4% increase, and the state workers didn't get zero, and then they look at their bill. Well, it doesn't do well for the image of the plant board. And again, I am not trying to disparage any of the plant board employees. I mean, if I'm out there, I'm mad at me right now. So I'm only saying things that I think are prudent, realistic for the area. And maybe and do other things if board members have other things they want to do.
I think if we're going to look at reducing administrative costs, it needs to be done in a way that doesn't affect employees' salaries. Because I think that the plant board did, and I'm probably not going to get the name of it right, but they did a compensation study. And that's where they came up with the current compensation plan of the 2+2. They did that for a reason, to be competitive with KU and Bluegrass and other municipalities in this area that take our people. The plant board is its employees. And if the employees come here for less than industry wages, and so they come and they work for a couple years and they get a couple years experience behind them, and then KU or Bluegrass or whoever will pay them more money, then they're going to leave here and go there.
Well,
so then we become a training ground, and it affects morale, it affects safety. If we got a lower workers' comp rate because of our safety record. If you have new employees that haven't been on the job as long, it increases the likelihood for accidents and mistakes. If you have employees that are hired for less money than industry standard and they work here, used to be you had the pension that would offset salaries, and so you stayed. Even though you weren't making as much as you could have been at KU or somewhere, you had that defined state pension that made it worth being here. Current employees don't have that anymore, a new hire. And so I think to be competitive, we don't, state government is full of clerical employees, not putting down clerical employees, I don't mean it that way. But we have some specialized people. Not everybody can climb that electric pole when the wind's blowing and the lightning's flashing and our electricity is out. And so when we change a compensation plan, there can be unintended consequences of changing that plan. It is a plan. It is a policy. It's not something for the board just out of the blue to decide.
It's a plan. It's not a policy. And throughout my years, I have seen other areas, other groups of employees that do those salary studies. I mean, that's not uncommon for a group of employees or an organization to do salary studies. That doesn't tie you to you, because one of the factors in a person's salary is their locale. I mean, if I lived in New York, I'd be making more money than in the comparable job in Frankfort. So I understand your point, and there may be some people that get that offer at KU if it's better, and may look on it. Maybe there's some specializations here that has to be looked at individually, but I'm talking about the across the board pay raise in a city that has, I don't know what state employees get. I'm assuming 0 or 1 or 2 or whatever. City, I think, is getting 2. I'm not sure what the county is getting, probably around the same thing. And we're making 4 plus. And again, I know I'm the bad guy in the room right now, but I'm just trying to call it like I see it. And when I see a ratepayer that says that looks at us, and she asks all of us, can any of y'all say anything when she talked about the building? And none of us really didn't have anything to say, and I'm sure none of us had anything to say. But her point she was making was what I'm making right now. So that's all I'm doing, is making the point that lady was making when she talked about being on fixed income, disability pay, and having trouble with rates. And all I'm trying to show her is we're willing to start to look at ourselves inwardly and maybe feel a little bit of that pain ourselves. And get a better relationship with Frankfort, that their perception of the plant board becomes better because they see us now making some sacrifices. That's all I'm saying.
I tell you what, I've got this going on the list. I think we have a few more things to talk about. I know the board has approved a contract for $45,000 for a search firm for the general manager, an additional estimated $8,000. So something we need to include in the budget is an additional $53,000 in this budget for the general manager search. Now I need to back off 15 from that because we just approved, and we'll cut a check this fiscal year. So let's take that back to 38. They will need to put into the next year's budget to pay the bills for the Tedesco firm and travel. And I believe, Anna Marie, you made a comment about energy efficiency and mentioned about putting $350,000 in there for that.
That's correct, yep.
I guess just before we move on, we kind of
Yep.
jumped. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, I was through.
No, go ahead.
I've said enough.
But yes.
I guess I would add one more comment to yours, and that's that, I actually share your opinion about sharing the pain, but I also think that it's important that we think about retention and that we make sure that any compensation modifications that we make take into account the competitive nature of the individual position that we're considering any reductions or increases to, because we do have some of those retention pressures.
And I guess just to clarify too, Steve, on what you were saying, is that would only affect the water customers?
No.
Oh.
What I said, what I did was identified $170,000 perhaps of savings.
Okay.
And I proposed out of that 170 to do a one-time rebate on the water for that 1 year. Wouldn't change the rate. The rate would be just what we approved last week, but a one-time 10% rebate on that water bill for 1 year to show that we took money from our administration and we gave it back to the ratepayer to help them. It's symbolic because it's not a lot. It wouldn't be a lot of money, but it shows, it's a signal that we are starting to look at the ratepayer, and we're starting to say, okay, we will, step aside we will take money from basically off our table, because the $350 you're talking about is going to come from fund balance.
I wonder if there's a broader thing we should consider there. I'm reminded of the comment you made in the first budget meeting where you asked, what else is not in the budget that you might need. I wonder if there's an effort here that maybe we should, to demonstrate that effort of tightening our belt and cost saving, we should have a broad effort across the entire agency to identify potential areas of savings and trajectories.
Well, my first thing was across the whole agency.
But I'm just not limiting it just to salary, but to look at, because in those original conversations we were talking about outsourcing and dues and subscriptions. I wonder if it's at a point where we should start thinking about all of those potential savings, so we have some sense of what a longer term.
Yeah, but in the administrative part of the budget, what is that? 70% personnel is 70. Yeah. What percentage personnel?
15.
I mean, of just the administration.
Of just administration, it's much, much lower than that. 15 for the entire company.
I think maybe we have to define what administration means.
Silos, and you're looking at the overall cost.
Yeah, I've got this supplemental schedule that we provided to the board. 50% of our cost 50% of the whole company's budget is electric power.
No, I'm not, I'm talking about, I understand all of those, take all of those out. I'm talking just to administer the agency.
Yes, to make sure that you have the human resources, the finance, support services, all of those functions.
And the payroll.
You need, customer service. It's $11.8 million, and most of that is going to be in your wages and benefits.
Yeah.
So most, if you go looking to cut anything else, it's tough. I understand. I totally understand what you're saying. I do. But I want to make sure it's clear, though, that when you talk to the staff about budgeting, that it's clear that we don't put fat in this budget. That it's important that the customers that watch this video know that what we've put in here we feel is responsible. And when I can sit back and say we're not raising your rates on anything except water this fiscal year and retrans rates on telecom, I think our customers appreciate no rate increase is huge, and we're always looking for cuts, always.
David, I wasn't calling any of that fat. I was calling it discretion, because you've proposed a pay rate and I proposed a lower one, so that created if you want to call it fat, me call it whatever.
I just want the customers to understand.
But no, I didn't say you had fat, but you proposed things that does not have to be at the level that you are proposing it.
I would be glad we can go line by line, because honestly, what we've put in here is what we're telling you we need to operate.
I'm not talking about anything but the payroll right now. And that's pretty clear, simple. 4.4 or whatever, or something lower. That's why I basically stayed there, because it's the largest non-technical, non-operational expense, and it's simple to look at. You got the payroll plus Social Security, FICA and all that stuff that you have there, and that makes up that number. So that's why that's the simplest number to look at, and that's in just about any budget that is nominated by people.
Okay, but
So it really comes down to whether we're going to stick with our compensation plan or whether we're going to diverge from it and cut the plan expense increases in payroll by $175,000. That's what you're saying.
$140,000. 30 of it is the uniform money that
140 off of from employee pay increases. Take this 140.
Actually, the difference is more than that, probably.
Yeah, but what's getting me is it's symbolically it's good, but we're going to turn around and talk about adding $350 for an energy efficiency program.
And the reason, and my man are working together. I mean, he has a pointed out.
So
and hers is just as valid as mine. I'm not saying that. All I did was show where there was money that you could use. I only asked, look, to do 40,000 of it. There's another 130 right there that could go to the energy efficiency.
One thing I think to keep in mind with the water customers, there's roughly 16,000 of them. If you gave $40,000 back, that's an annual rebate to the customer of $2.50.
Exactly.
And I know it's symbolic, but I think you may actually get the opposite effect, as in your customers may be quite angry that you gave them $2.50.
No, because our public relations person is going to say that we did that.
Yeah, but people aren't stupid. You know, I mean, come on. So you get, you can't go to McDonald's on $2.50. Why should we penalize our employees for giving this symbolic gesture that isn't going to mean
I'm using that word symbolic because it's not a lot of money, but we need to start looking inward at budgets, because one thing here, we have a large fund balance with a and I'm for that. And the rainy day fund for however many months. And that's great. I want to stay there. And that's why I'm looking where I'm looking. But anything that you want right now, it's going to come from that fund balance.
I think if we want to look at saving money, we need to look at how we spend money.
Who?
The board.
Well, that's only going to be, what's our budget, 60,000?
No, the board has spent $50,000 on Reed Smith and 70-something on E3, and basically whatever that. the 53 that's going to end up for the GM search, and we've got 17.5 in the possible budget for us to be able to have training and go to conferences. If we're going to look at saving plant board and the ratepayers' money, we need to look at how we spend money, in my opinion.
You can reduce my training amount out of that. I'll vote for everyone else's, so I have a problem with that.
Okay, so I think at this point, we have a proposal that David will report back to us on the Friday meeting. Is that what we resolved?
No, ma'am. I really don't know. We have to have a budget approved by June 30.
Mm-hmm.
You've got something you've not discussed yet. Would you like to talk about the energy efficient?
I'm through.
Right, yeah.
I guess, do we need to decide on how we're going to report that back, or what
I mean,
output do you
it's
want
either
for
you want to do the different pay rate or you don't. If you don't, then that's fine.
Our recommendation is to stay with the exact same compensation plan because it's extremely targeted and it's set out for a purpose. I'm looking for all information from all board members so that we can get changes made to get a single unified, or at least 3 votes to approve the budget. And I know there's more requests for changes out there, so I'm trying to get all of it compiled, come back with the board with, hey, I need you to vote on these things.
Right. So I guess that's what I was saying is where we're ending with Steve's suggestion is that you'd compile it and come back on Friday to.
I guess what's the agenda item we'll be voting for on Friday is kind of where I was trying to get to.
I guess to go with Mr. Mason's, does he want to go with the 2.75 or 3% versus what we've got budgeted?
I'll leave it. Well,
And then from that, if the board does just decide to change, there's a lot of implementation necessary as far as do we keep the same approval, employee appraisal structure? Does a raise happen in July? Is it in January? Or is it just in January?
well, I mean, if it's 2.75, you just split it like you're splitting it now.
So it'd be right off the start of the year, or you would cut it in half and do it over 6 months?
Yeah, you split it like you're splitting that.
Okay.
Well, I guess one question before David goes through all that work is this something we want to vote on at this point, or do we want to have David consider something? Any thoughts on that?
I'm fine with voting on it because if you don't want to do it, I'm fine with that. I just made the proposal. If the board doesn't want to accept that, I'm fine with that.
Personally, I'd rather wait till Friday to vote if we could.
Okay, that's good info.
Maybe it's motion and we can act on it now.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Well, for what it's worth, if I would rather have some time to think about it, and would rather see it, so if we could do it on Friday, that would.
Okay.
Okay, so, that'd be one of the items we're going to review on Friday. So, do other members have other things that David would prepare for Friday?
I have no proposals for change.
Me either.
Okay. I know one.
Commend the staff and our GM for the masterful job doing creating this budget.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Okay. Well, it's been mentioned, so I'll continue with the $350,000 for energy efficiency. And
Can you speak up just a little bit?
sure, VEIC is in the process of defining our energy efficiency goals that we would set up. They'll be back in July to talk about where they are with the research that was done during May with talking to different stakeholders. In September, they would come back with a proposal, and I think it would be good to have something in the budget that we could know is there to act on their suggestions. They gave me the information about a similar sized utility in Ohio that spent $350,000 with the hopes of having a benefit of $1 million over a 10 to 15 year period. So it's something that started that would pay back over that period of time. We don't know exactly what programs that VEIC will recommend, but I think that we want to focus on something like Steve's recommendation, but something that would help customers and have long-term benefit. Things like improving lighting, better insulation, areas where they need guidance or education. And I think this would be a good use of our funds. It would help our customer base and the community. And there are areas that are difficult for individuals to figure out, like how do you insulate something, where do you go to find the solution? So the educational aspect along with direction. So
So your proposal is put some dollars in the budget for that also?
correct, for
Do you have a
next
dollar
year's.
amount in
Yep.
mind?
And one thing too is that currently we have a contract with the EIC, which was for $120,000. I think we paid some of that in this budget year, and some of it will be in next budget year. So
Is there any dollars in the existing budget? I may be reminded on this. Any money in the existing budget, the proposed budget, for implementation of an efficiency program? Do we have that?
No, sir. Our plan and what we had planned when we put this together is that they're going to come back, the firm, in September with a layout of all the different things that they were tasked with doing, putting together a plan, metrics that we can actually measure to make sure it's actually working, things like that. And we've not put money in there. We're also moving towards KyMEA, where we talked about shared cost. We share 50% today of the cost. The idea is that we can share 50% with the agency when we get to that point. So that was something we wanted to put to the board as considering when we get to that point. Do we want to go alone now, or do we want to try to share cost in something like this? That was the reason we did not put it in the budget.
So if we didn't put anything in the budget now for energy efficiency, and they come back in September with their report, we could do a budget amendment at that time to put something in the budget then?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
we could do
And what you
that,
can
yeah.
conceptually think is it's just going to subtract from that in estimated year-end cash reserve balance is what would happen.
So I think a better move would be to not have that hurdle to jump in September, to already have money in the budget to proceed. And I think that from a standpoint of the EIC convincing us or presenting a program to us, if we know, oh, now we're going to have to reconsider whether we want to pay for it, I think that would be better to have it in the budget, and we'd still make decisions on whether we want to spend the money at that point or how we want to spend it, but that it's already available so that isn't an extra question or impeding the solution.
I think a couple of points that are important to be aware of is that, energy efficiency is one of those ways that we can demonstrate, to our customer base quickly that we are thinking about their bills, because any efficiency measures they put in place immediately reduce their bills. And, waiting for a year or 2 or 5 down the road to do a cooperative program are that many years that the bills for our customers aren't going down. And the other point I think is important is that, or I guess maybe 2 points I have, is that, the cheapest kilowatt hour of power that we procure, looking at that 50% of our cost structure going to purchasing power, the cheapest kilowatt hour we can buy is the one we don't buy. It's the one we get from efficiency. And also any dollars that we spend on efficiency, there's a payback period on that. So the dollars that we invest in efficiency is just that. It's an investment that has a payback to our ratepayers in a reduction of their bills.
I think one other aspect too is it sets kind of a culture of thinking about the energy you're using, and it has benefits to people who move away or come here knowing that it's a program that we're providing, it's a thought process. I think some of the aspects might be helping students in schools to understand what we're talking about, so that it becomes more of a lifelong focus. And it's also an area where I think it's been shown Kentucky is weak, that we have low energy costs, but actual costs of the consumer in a house is still higher than other parts of the country because the energy is not used efficiently. So it's an area that we can improve, and there's lots of possibilities that are pretty easy to get to because it's never been focused on here.
I think it's a good point. I think Kentucky, if I remember the numbers right, we're around 9th in the United States for cost of electricity rate, but we're 37th or 38th in actual payment, actual bills paid by customers, which at the end of the day is all the customers care about.
So we could improve our standing. And I think, changing from KU to KyMEA and the cost reductions are, that costs will remain consistent, I think that's a very good plus for customers. But that we're actually helping them reduce their bills by just using energy more efficiently and making their houses more comfortable as well, as a byproduct.
See, I have so many questions on all of that as far as the actual implementation of a policy.
Well, that's what they'll be presenting to us.
Right, but I have problems putting money in a budget, particularly when we're talking about cutting payroll cost. I have problems putting money in a budget for programs that we don't even know what we're talking about yet. And it actually translating into savings for our ratepayers without knowing specifically what the programs are. I just find it all very difficult to...
Well, that's why we hired, in part at least, an outside consultant to help us through that. But, you know, and part of the reason why we chose the EIC was because we were impressed with their educational materials, with their programs that they have put in place. So we have a certain amount of confidence with them that they would offer us a reasonable and good, essentially you could call it, product.
Well, we should have had your discussion before we had Steve's discussion.
Well, I think they're both
because
valid.
I have a really hard time talking about spending big chunks of money when at the same time we're talking about not giving our employees a decent raise.
Okay.
I just have a hard time going
They are
there.
two different issues, and I guess energy efficiency will pay back to our customers, whereas $2.50 is that. It's...
Remember now, the ratepayers are paying for the study, so they're just getting back what they've paid for, the $350. That's coming from the ratepayers.
Well, there's a 3-to-1 ratio of benefit to investment.
But we don't know that, Anna Marie.
Well, it's an industry standard. I've checked with another outside consultant outside of the EIC, and it's been written in articles. It's,
you know, the slide presentation that they gave about buying having the washer and dryer energy efficient, and that being $1,500 over a 10-year period, which broke down to $150 a year. They didn't really say if buying the washer and dryer was included in that $1,500. You know, so
I think they were just trying to show some examples. In fact, I asked them to show some things rather than just the concept, to show some concrete examples, which they didn't go into.
My point is that the concrete example they were showing had about the same savings to it as Steve's $2 and whatever that we're going to get back as the rebate for us to feel good about not spending the ratepayers' money. And I just think that these feel-good symbolic programs don't accomplish a whole lot other than we can sit here and feel good because we've done something.
Well, I'm going to say, it's symbolic, and maybe it does feel good, but it is a significant decision to utilize money, tighten the belt, our belt, utilizing monies that are within. Then it is $2, but you know, if I can use the analogy of me going out here to Planet Fitness just trying to lose weight, I can run 2 hours and I'm not going to lose a pound at that. But if this is the start of a practice that we do every year, then it becomes something. It doesn't start off at something, but if we do this every year, it becomes something. And now you have a significant impact on the ratepayers. So nothing starts off running at sprinting. Everything starts to crawl. So I don't like the feel-good thing because that dismisses what I'm saying. I'm saying start, crawl with this, continue it, and one day it will be running and there will be significant reductions to ratepayers, and they will appreciate that we have made sacrifices like they're making them. That's all I'm saying over time. It's not going to be tomorrow.
I think it's important to indicate we're starting to turn the ship. And, you know, also along the lines of Anna Marie's discussion, you know, a 3-to-1 return on $350,000 is not trivial. I mean, that's, you know, it's $800,000 roughly back in ratepayers' pockets. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at.
Sure.
15.
Okay. So,
I'll put that on the list.
okay, thank you. And one question I had brought up was considering merging AMI and fiber to the home. I don't know if there's been time to research that.
Yeah, I don't think that, from what I'm understanding, that's
Travis is gonna
absolutely
look
a budget buster. I mean, we're talking, it's not
I don't think
feasible.
there's any, I don't see the technical why you would necessarily
Okay.
do that, because as we, you know, we've asked some about fiber to the home and the connections that you would make through AMI, and they're very small and few in between. And again, we're gonna have that, all that'll be in the conversations that, the AMI consultants, when we get ready to issue that RFP and we have that, all that stuff will be in front of the board. We specifically asked them to go in depth and talk about that. But there's no,
Okay, well, that answered that one. We also talked about doing some type of solar installation here on Plant Barn property. We talked about the water department or the administration land or the service building roof. I guess the first thing that would happen would be to do some kind of study to look at the options, and I don't know if we need to put money in the budget in order to do that, or...
Something, Vent and I can tag team this one. You know, we're talking about putting in an 80 megawatt utility scale solar project, which gets you economies of scale that get prices on that power down significantly. If you go out and do one-off solar on property, you're not getting your cheapest rate for that. We're going out and talking about procuring 80 megawatts. We don't see why you would do that at this time.
I guess from my perspective, I'd actually like to see those numbers. I'd like to have some sense of what our inventory of available land would be, what we'd actually be able to install, and, you know, what benefits are there for us. You know, there are certainly savings in being able to shave our peak. There's certainly savings in not having to pay transmission charges, and just to actually have those numbers in front of us and have some sense of what the actual value or not value that's there.
So to initiate that as something to look at, do we need to put something in the budget for it, or how would we?
I'd like to put that to the board for a vote, if we'd like to do that or not, or have it, we don't have that in our plan. So if...
there'd be no way by Friday we could come.
Well,
No.
I guess from my perspective,
It's a use of our employee time if you want us to.
I guess from my perspective, I don't know that we'd want a proposal by Friday. I think the discussion was just starting off that process, and do we need to put money in the budget to have that analysis done?
I think the answer's fairly easy. I mean, KyMEA just did a large RFP, and they looked at small scale solar and large scale solar, and the small scale stuff was not competitive. I know that's a PPA, but it wasn't even close to being competitive for small scale solar. Of course, those RFPs and all that stuff, if it hasn't already been shared with the board, and I think it has, you know, it can be under your NDAs. You know, it's pretty easy to see that utility scale solar is significantly cheaper. You know, it really doesn't take much of a study. You just can quickly look at the RFP results of dollars. If you put them around here, you know, certainly you can do that, but I think you're putting in higher cost solar. If you want that plus the solar at KyMEA, that's fine. Certainly, whatever you want to do. You know, in my opinion, the one thing that, you know, the KyMEA solar is the lowest cost option. They've done an RFP. It clearly shows that of solar. That would be the cheapest way to do solar for your customers. Now, the concept of a community solar is a different concept. That's not the lowest, cheapest solar. That's you're selling or leasing individual panels to customers that want to physically see it. They can put it on their own house, something like that. You know, that's a different model, that's a different thing you're asking for. It's not necessarily price there, it's someone being involved directly in it. But as far as which one's cheaper, KyMEA is 50 megawatts of solar for the all requirements of which we would be about 25 megawatts. That versus however you wanted to break it up into lots in Frankfort, I mean, that's a fairly easy cost. I mean, certainly the utility scale is cheaper.
I mean, I understand the cost of construction is lower when you're doing those larger installations. But does that necessarily mean that our cost per kilowatt hour delivered to a particular agency is offset, is also going to be lower? And do we actually have those numbers written down somewhere where we can see them?
I believe we have it written down for us individually, but I mean, certainly lots of people do that on a daily basis. And we can do the study. I think we're spinning wheels on something that's just like a financial sense.
Well, I think there are 3 areas where, you know, importing that energy from solar panels out in western Kentucky there's some line loss. I don't know if that's significant. There's transmission costs have gone up. And there's also the time frame peak load situation that by creating the energy here, it would be closer to our peak load perhaps, but that hasn't really been considered.
I think we're at the point where if the board would like us to go this direction, we'd like 3 votes to go this direction. If not, we're putting a lot of time into KyMEA and a lot of time into bringing the lowest cost power to this town. We just sat here and talked about we're not going to have a rate increase to our customers. It's a big story for years to come if things work out the way that we have laid out. So if the board would like us to spend the time and energy to do that, I would like the full board to support the effort.
I think that's what we're talking about, is putting the items together to get a list on Friday to vote on. So that's the whole point.
So that's be great. Then we can talk about it on Friday.
Okay, sounds good. And let's see. I think the other thing I'm aware of is drinking fountains. I think that from the email that you sent out, our cost is about average $5,000 per drinking fountain.
We spend about $4,900 per fountain. Mm-hmm. So if the board would like to do more, we're looking at, if the city would agree to do the maintenance as they have with the existing 3 fountains we put in, we're looking at around $5,900. If we get the same fountains, and depending on where we're putting them, existing infrastructure around the area, things like that. So if the board would like to do that, I'll put that on the list to talk about.
So where are you talking about putting them?
I don't know if we have that list yet. I think it would be pending David's thing. I mean, in general, the ones that we've placed now, I've received a lot of great feedback with, and it's part of the entire initiative where we've done the Frankfort on Tap and all that. And I think that's it's really nice, visceral and visible, way for us to have our product out there.
So we have them now, we're down on the mall.
There's in both parks, so East and West Parks, and
Juniper Hills and Lakeview.
Thanks.
Yep. So
I'm just trying to think of other places in town where there are enough people.
I guess the initial thoughts I would have would be Cove Spring Park, the pavilion downtown where they have the farmers market and all of that. Okay. There's no water source for the folks that are wandering around in there. I don't know that I have a third.
Well, I think perhaps asking the city, since we want them to buy in.
I think it's all part of the dynamic, because we just it starts a discussion about, we did 3 last time, we'll do 3 again. Let's find the best places that are most economic, that have the highest traffic rates, that there's the biggest need. So.
But I think those are 2 good locations, and someone may come up with more. So it's again, sharing with our customer base. I know there's a lot of interest in improving tourism. It would be valuable to the community, so it's something we could consider. Were there any other proposals that we'd want to consider?
The only one that's out there is that I have, that we've already talked about, was the training budget for for the board members. And it was basically the same conversation we had before, that I think it's important that we as a board have access to appropriate training. There's a lot of complex decisions we're faced with, and I think it's appropriate that we have enough of a budget out there so that all the board members can attend, 2 training sessions, per year if they so choose, just to start the ball rolling towards getting a higher level of education amongst the board members.
So I'm in favor of that. Other board members may have a comment on it. I guess we'll vote on it on Friday. Yep. Okay. So I did have one other question concerning number of staff. I was reading the meeting minutes from, I believe, the May meeting, and there was one comment that said we have 55 new employees in the last 2 fiscal years. I'm sorry, we had 55 new employees hired, and we had 28 employees retired. So do we have 27 additional employees?
No, ma'am. That's either people that have taken other jobs in other places or left for any other reason, but we're not up that many employees. If you look at the budget on page 17, you'll see that we're actually projecting a budget that's $280,000 less than last year. So what you have is a group of employees that have been with the plant board. Most of these employees are retiring at 20-plus years. Now, granted, employees are moving in to fill those management positions, but you're hiring in new employees at your entry-level positions. So we actually are budgeting less in budget in payroll than we did a year ago.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for answering that.
Yes.
And if nobody else has items to vote on, I had kind of one more question. It may be in there. I only got to quickly review the list you sent out. Steve and I had asked at the last meeting for a list of all subscriptions and outsourcing and all those things. And I saw the list. I didn't get a chance to look at it in detail. The quick skim, I didn't see engineering services on there. And I'm not sure how you quantify that, because I know we use them everywhere, GRW and those types of guys. Is there some way we can get some sense of what all that outside engineering cost is, those types of resources? And then the other one was, and I'm not real sure how we quantify it, but there's other parts of the agency that we outsource. We outsource the phone services. We outsource the advertising services there. Is there a way you can present those expense costs versus our revenue costs, so we have some sense of what that dynamic is as well?
We sure do. We do wholesale. We have wholesale security, that telephone. So would you consider wholesale broadband and those type? You're not considering those wholesale?
No, my thoughts are more along, what we're paying, outside folks to do, or what we're sending, management services off for. Like the phone services come to mind, GRW comes to mind.
So outsourcing.
Just something that's, getting back to the earlier comment, what are our benefits there? And similar to the discussion around the NOC, what are we saving versus what are we trading, right?
Okay.
I guess the one thing that pops into my head around all that is, we had the contract for the cable installers that was, I'm sure I'm going to have missed the number, $160,000, $180,000 for those 2 FTEs, which was a lot. And just to get some sense of what those types of things are.
And we've discontinued that.
Yeah, right.
This time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So I think we're ready to move on to the next item, which is consider approval of, number 12, consider renewal of the annual price contract for hydrants and valves to Ferguson Water Works. Well, Mark Redmond.
Most of FPB's hydrants and valves are purchased through an annual price contract. This is just a renewal from the 2017 bid. We bid some things every year, but last year there was a pretty good price increase on the hydrants, and the manufacturers were willing to just extend the contracts this year with no increases. And the metals markets are up a little bit, so we feel like that's the best option. We may see an increase if we bid it. So that's what we're asking for. It's just a renewal of the same contract you approved last year.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Okay, Steve, motion that we consider renewal of the annual, or that we actually renew the annual price contract for hydrants and valves to Ferguson Water Works.
Sorry.
And we have a second from Walt. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. Number 13, consider Asphalt Tree Expert Company's contract renewal offer for tree trimming services. Scott?
Yes, I think as Mark just said, this is also a renewal contract. A Splendid Tree Expert Company has offered a FPB a contract renewal of a 2.5 price increase for labor and equipment. That is based upon the CPI index. That's what that 2.5% is. And the contract that we currently have allows for an annual price adjustment, such as a CPI. The tree trimming services was bid out in 2017 with Asplin being the lowest bidder. And rebidding this service would be more than likely result in an increase in the 2.5% based upon what we've had in the bid packages. So Aspen was way lower than anybody else, but they're going to raise their prices if you ask for another
I'll
bid.
make the motion to consider the
Thank you.
tree expert.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 14, consider award bid invitation 1658 annual price contract for purchase of wood poles to Brown Wood Preserving Company.
Okay, so this is not a renewal, but it is an annual contract that we bring just about every year. Our utility poles, most of them, all the wood ones, we keep in stock because when you need them, you can't just run out and get a utility pole at Lowe's. And so this contract is used just to keep from doing a bid every single time. Instead, we can just call an order on a established contract price, and we know what it'll be and when they'll be there.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve wood poles to Brown Wood Preserving.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. Number 15, consider award bid invitation 1659 annual price contract for distribution transformers to Wesco Distribution.
Okay, and this is another annual contract, same deal as the wood poles. We can't buy our transformers off the shelf anywhere. We use a different voltage. And so this is the same thing. We stock these things, keep them in inventory, and from time to time, depending on development and maintenance and storms and all kinds of stuff like that, we need them immediately, and then we replenish our supplies using this contract at an established price.
Okay.
I move we award bid invitation 1659 annual price contract for distribution transformers to Wesco Distribution.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passed. Number 16, consider award bid invitation 1660 for contract labor for active device replacement to custom cable.
Yes, this is, we've been talking about this for a while. We purchased an active tobacco last year as part of the initial phase for the study we had done for our infrastructure. As a part of that, we also put in a budget $650,000 for the active replacement as far as labor to get it done. We sent the bid out, got the bid back, came in, well, the low bidder came in quite a bit lower. We actually adjusted the budget, so we lowered the amount from $650,000 to $400,000 in the next budget for this contractor to come in and replace these actives. Hopefully we can get this done in 4 to 5 months, and so by when times start getting a little colder outside, the equipment will be more stable, and this will give us enough time to deploy fiber to the home.
Okay. I feel like we've discussed this in the past, and we've actually been working on it, so we've done some of them.
Yes, we've done Node 6.
Okay.
Which is Home Street area. Let's see, Home Street, Blanton Acres, that area. That was kind of the area we decided to do to test.
Okay.
And so yes, that area has been done.
Would you say that's like 20% of all the locations, or?
I'd say it's probably less than 3%.
Oh, okay, so very small.
Very small.
Okay.
Yeah, and this contract, the way we bid this was, we didn't bid like time and material, we just bid it by doing the actives. So if you, worst case, this will be about $330-something thousand. But as a part of the $400,000 that we rolled forward for this project, there's material that still needs to be purchased. So when they put these pieces of actives in, there's something called shrink tubing that goes around the connections. There's a lot of stuff like that, just material items. It's probably $50,000 or $60,000 that we'll need as a part of the project.
I see.
So that's why it's $400,000.
So this is actually for contract labor and for some equipment or materials?
Well, this portion of it's just contract labor.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, the $400,000 was what we put in the budget for the project going forward. So this is gonna be about $340,000 of that $400,000 spent here. And then the remainder will be, for the miscellaneous materials we'll need in the field.
I see, okay. Okay, do we have a motion?
Move that we award bid invitation number 1660 for contract labor to active device replacement to custom cable.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on this one? There are a lot of figures involved, I know. Okay. Seems like no discussion. All in favor? Okay, motion passed. Number 17, consider approving Hallmark drama amendment.
Thank you. FPB executed an agreement in January of 2016 for carriage of Hallmark Channel on classic cable and Hallmark movies and mysteries on preferred cable. This NCTC agreement has a term through October 31st, 2021. In October of 2017, Hallmark started a new channel called Hallmark Drama. We've received numerous requests from customers expressing interest in this channel, and this amendment would give FPB the right to distribute Hallmark Drama with no additional expense or carriage requirements. The amendment has the same term as the existing agreement, October 31st, 2021. If approved, Hallmark Drama would be on FPB Preferred Cable Channel 166, and the staff attorney has reviewed this agreement and meets with his approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about this.
Just one quick one. You said there were numerous requests from customers. How do we get those requests?
Usually phone calls get to my desk or
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Yeah, we've had quite a few on Facebook. Emails, every method. Yeah, Ms. Warren.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that, excuse me.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I move that we approve Hallmark drama amendment.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. Number 16, consider bid invitation 1657 annual price contract for water treatment chemicals.
This is yet another annual contract. The staff prepares an annual bid each year for the chemicals used in the water treatment. The bid includes estimated quantities and explains that the orders could exceed or fall short of the estimates. All vendors bid with the understanding that the bid's purpose is to hold the unit price throughout FPB's fiscal year. This particular bid received responses from 23 companies. We do this through a reverse bidding process, which has been very beneficial over the last 4 or 5 years at keeping our chemical costs down. After reviewing each bid, staff recommends awarding to the lowest bidders meeting specifications, with one exception, that being powdered activated carbon. And so for the benefit of those who will be viewing this, I'm going to just go on and read through all 10 different chemicals. Liquid ferric chloride to PVS Technologies for $230 per liquid ton. Liquid sodium hydroxide to Brentag Mid-South for 0.1888 cents per liquid pound. Polyaluminum chloride to U.S. Alco at 0.1612 cents per liquid pound. Powdered activated carbon to Calgon carbon at 0.7800 cents per dry pound. And that award is based not only on the price, but we do testing on all of the carbons that have been bid to make sure that they remove the most taste and odor causing compounds possible. So we use a water quality parameter as well as the cost to determine who is awarded that bid. Hydrofluorosilicic acid to Penco for 0.1275 cents per liquid pound. Anhydrous ammonia to Airgas at 0.9800 cents per liquid pound. Potassium permanganate to Shannon at $1.55 per dry pound. Sulfuric acid to Chemical Resources at 0.13 cents per liquid pound. Zinc orthophosphate to Chemrite at 0.55 cents per liquid pound. Sodium chloride bulk salt to Morton Salt at $228.60 per dry pound. And water softener salt to Chemical Resources at 0.2170 cents per dry pound. As of May 31st, 2018, our chemical purchases totaled $394,238 with 1 month remaining. Staff has requested $430,000 in the proposed budget for treatment chemical purchases. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
This OSG sodium chloride, what, that's $220 a pound, you say?
It's $220 a ton, I'm sorry. That's the salt used to generate the liquid chlorine. So it's part of our chlorine generation process.
You said a pound.
I am sorry. It is getting late.
Right in there with gold.
Looks like the liquid sodium hydroxide market is doing well.
Yes.
34% increase.
I wonder if that's used in fertilizer also.
Do they always vary that much?
They're usually all over the place.
Yeah.
Every year. So, like we've had many years when they all went down. That's the one thing I noticed the very first time we did it was how varied they were. Each one is used in lots of different chemical processes, as you can imagine, throughout the world.
Right.
And all kind of different drivers that change that.
Yeah, the whole manufacturing process is so complex, and then you throw in the increases with gasoline and freight costs that we've been seeing go up over the summer. So I think that had something to do.
People bidding on that, that was the cheapest we could get.
Oh yeah, some of this, they turn into some pretty good bidding wars. I think what market went on almost 2.5 hours.
It's scheduled for like 15 minutes, but every time someone else bids, it extends it like 4 minutes.
So
more than 2 hours.
So it's like
What you
eBay.
decide if you're getting a good price is in first and second bidders. If they're within 1 or 2%, you know you're getting market value. And that's usually what it comes right down to, because
it has been.
Okay. Good, so do we have a motion?
I move we award bid invitation 1657, the annual price contract for water treatment chemicals.
And a second? Okay, Steve Mason seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passed. We next have converting into recess from FPB into the MPC meeting. Do we need to have a motion to leave the FPB meeting?
I move we recess FPB regular meeting.
Second? Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our action item in the MPC meeting is to conduct an election of officers for the Frankfort Plant Board Municipal Projects Corporation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We need a motion to convene the Municipal Projects Corporation meeting.
So
Thank you.
moved.
I'll second.
And, okay, we have a motion and second to have a Municipal Projects Corporation meeting. And, let's see, James, do you handle the election of officers?
I'll be happy to.
Okay.
Just need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To convene, we need a vote.
Oh, are we all in favor of convening?
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Okay.
passed.
All right, thank you. We need to elect officers for the Frankfort Plant Board Municipal Projects Corporation. The officers are a president, a vice president, and a secretary treasurer. These are for 3-year terms. The terms actually expired May the 1st of 2018. So new terms would go through May 1st of 2021. So let's start with president, and let's open the floor for nominations for president of the Frankfort Plant Board Municipal Projects Corporation.
I nominate Steve Mason, President, Frankfort Municipal
Mr. Mason's name
Projects Corporation.
is placed in nomination. Are there other nominations for president? All right. Hearing none, we'll close nominations, and all those in favor of Mr. Mason being president of the FPB Municipal Projects Corporation, please say aye.
Aye.
Apparently it's something nobody wants.
My first meeting on the broker, they did that to me.
I figured.
We'll now open the floor for nominations for vice president of the Municipal Projects Corporation.
Nominate Ralph Ludwig.
I'm a lame duck or dead duck or something, so there's really no point in putting me on there.
So, does that mean you're declining, or?
Yeah, I don't think it would serve a purpose.
Okay, I nominate Don Hale to be the vice chair of the Municipal Projects Corporation.
All right, Ms. Hale's name is placed in nomination. Are there other nominations for the office of vice president? All right, all those in favor of Ms. Hale being vice president of the Municipal Projects Corporation, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. The final office is secretary treasurer, and I will note, under the bylaws of that corporation, secretary treasurer can be the same person and need not be a director. So I'll put that information out there for what it's worth. Floor is open for nominations for the office of secretary treasurer of the Municipal Projects Corporation.
I would nominate Steve Mason.
What?
We can do two, right? What you said?
I think one per customer.
Oh, I misunderstood what you were just telling us.
And we don't want to overburden
I guess-
Mr. Mason.
I nominate Walt Baldwin.
Okay.
Mr. Baldwin's name has been placed in nomination. Are there other nominations for Secretary Treasurer of the Municipal Projects Corporation? All those in favor of Mr. Baldwin serving as Secretary Treasurer of the Municipal Projects Corporation, please say aye.
Aye. So I think the confusing point was, you don't have to be a director, so you don't have to be a board member to be a secretary treasurer, but
Oh, I thought you were saying that you could hold similar
Yeah.
offices. And I was going on Ralph's same thing. You've got 4 years left. You got a 3-year term.
I may not have said it well, but that would
Okay.
conclude the election of officers of the Municipal Projects Corporation.
okay. Do we have a motion to close the Municipal Projects Corporation meeting?
So moved.
All in favor? And we have Ralph seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We need a motion to rejoin the FPB meeting, or to...
So moved.
Okay. And a second? And Steve seconded. Thank you. So now we're on item 20, General Manager's comments. Okay. 21, old and new business. I think we're all talked out. Okay. Request permission to have the chair call a closed session to discuss pending litigation regarding liquidated damages pursuant to KRS 61-810-1C. Oh. Oh, to discuss proposed litigation. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, it's, that got left off here. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. So, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Okay. No, going to.
We need to vote. Second and vote.
Oh, all in favor? Oh, so Don seconded, and all in favor of going to closed session?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed, go into closed session. Do we have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're adjourned.